Imagine living in a kingdom where bloodthirsty monsters roam the night, but the real monsters are sitting right at your own dinner table. Decades ago, the kingdom of Dietrich was absolute chaos as rogue vampires started hunting humans in the open. Things got way worse when high-ranking nobles started secretly colluding with these bloodsuckers, setting up human trafficking rings right under everyone's noses. Talk about corrupt politicians taking things to a whole new terrifying level. With blood spilling everywhere and terror gripping the streets, the entire kingdom was drowning in total despair. Sound-wise, you can practically hear the eerie silence settling over the blood-soaked cobbles before the real legends step up. Enter former Duke Levi Evans, one of the absolute badasses who decided he wasn't going to let these Nightwalkers walk all over humanity anymore. Turns out, the puppet masters behind all this carnage were the pure-blood vampires, the arrogant top dogs who thought their superior muscle and big brains meant they should rule the kingdom. Honestly, why is it always the aristocrats who think they own the place? Classic villain complex. Well, Levi and his ally weren't having it, so they tracked down these purebloods, exposed their identities, and wiped out their entire lineage on the spot. Down goes the vampire empire, just like that. So you'd think that after annihilating an entire species of bloodthirsty overlords, everyone would just live happily ever after, right? Yeah, if only storybooks worked like that. On the surface, peace finally returns to the kingdom, with citizens walking around bright sunlit streets like nothing ever happened. But you know there's gotta be a catch brewing behind closed doors. Flash forward to a dark, stormy night with rain heavily pouring down on a gloomy castle tower. Cue the ominous dramatic storm sounds. Inside the dim hall, our heroine Eleanor stands face to face with a mysterious, dangerously handsome man stepping into the moonlight. He reminds her of their secretly contract, stepping dangerously close as pink roses bloom in the background. Because what's a dark romance without some dramatic floral effects? Before she can even think, he pulls her in and locks lips with her in a passionate kiss. Swoosh! The tension in the room explodes instantly. She tries to catch her breath, completely overwhelmed as he pulls her closer, leaving her head spinning as her heart races out of control. Her whole body heats up every single time he touches her. And honestly, look at this guy walking around with his shirt wide open, showing off 8-pack abs. Like, bro, put some clothes on. This is supposed to be a serious contract deal. Plop! We cut back to reality, dropping into a seemingly calm setting where a harsh voice interrupts her thoughts about rejecting suitors. Her adoptive father, the Count, is sitting across from her with the ultimate annoyed dad face, scowling like she just ruined his retirement plan. Eleanor just stares back with icy, unbothered blue eyes, casually dropping the fact that she turned the guy down simply because she didn't like his face. Savage move, honestly. She reminds her family at the dinner table that since she already lost the man she actually loved, she's entitled to at least be picky about who she marries. Meanwhile, her green-eyed sister Angela sits there acting like a silent saint. Look at Angela posing with her hand on her chin like an innocent angel. Seriously, if fake sympathy was an Olympic sport, she'd take home the gold medal every single time. The Count winces in total frustration, telling Eleanor she needs to drop her ridiculous standards and just compromise for once. Eleanor glares sideways with absolute disdain, fully aware of the dirty game her family is trying to play behind her back. In her mind, she knows these suitors are just cash grabs for the Count's family, yet none of these slimy aristocrats are ever deemed good enough for their precious biological daughter, Angela. She casually wipes her lips with a napkin, pointing out that finding someone better than Lord Jules is gonna be tough. You know, the guy Angela stole right out from under her. Eleanor hits them with a sweet, venomous smile, letting that sharp shade drop right onto the table like a smoke bomb. Bam! The Count's forehead vein practically pops out as he slams his hands down, screaming at Eleanor to watch her mouth before she crosses the line. Right on cue, Angela pulls out her classic crocodile tears, whimpering that it's all her fault, while their mother instantly rushes to coddle her like a fragile glass doll. Eleanor stands there completely isolated in the dark, watching this sick little theatrical performance play out for the 1000th time. Through a shattered mirror visual effect, we see her tragic reality. She's always the scapegoat just because she doesn't share a single drop of blood with these fake snakes. Turns out, years ago, her adoptive parents couldn't have kids, so they picked little Eleanor out of an orphanage solely because she was the prettiest kid in the building. Talk about shallow motives from day one. At first, they showered her with all the love and affection in the world, treating her like their true darling princess. And little Eleanor tried so hard to be the perfect daughter, balancing heavy etiquette books on her head every day just to prove she belonged. But the very next year, a miracle happened and baby Angela was born. Just like that, the parents completely threw Eleanor to the side like last season's trash. Little Eleanor was left wandering down dark, empty mansion hallways at night, clutching her little plush bunny for comfort. She even overheard her parents whispering in the dark, complaining that taking her in was the biggest mistake of their lives. Ouch, my heart just broke for her. Her parents didn't even care about her well-being anymore. They literally wished she didn't exist so they could hoard all their wealth and affection for Angela. Standing in the shadows with her faceless figure, little Eleanor was branded as a burden in her own home before she even turned 6. Terrified of being thrown back out on the street at any moment, she learned to hide in the quiet corners of the mansion, living like a phantom. When the parents started giving her cold looks, the mansion servants took notes and started giving her moldy bread and thin water, while Angela watched her with total disgust behind that cute little smile. And it gets worse. Whenever Angela threw a tantrum, the Count would literally whip little Eleanor while the mom comforted Angela with toys stolen straight out of Eleanor's hands. A splash of blood-red agony covers the screen, because in this household, if Angela so much as frowned, Eleanor paid for it in pure physical pain. Years later, as a grown woman, Eleanor found her only true sanctuary inside the quiet, sun-drenched rows of the Grand Library. As she reaches for a book, a soft, friendly voice interrupts the stillness, asking if she enjoys reading. She turns to find a handsome young noble named Jules Keister, smiling warmly at her without an ounce of judgment in his eyes. Jules casually explains he's just browsing while his father negotiates upstairs, giving her that classic smooth gentleman charm. Used to being treated like dirt, Eleanor gives a polite bow and tries to bow out gracefully before she gets in trouble. Grab! Jules reaches out and gently takes her wrist, stopping her in her tracks as delicate white flowers bloom around them. Eleanor freezes, her cheeks flushing bright pink as she turns back in utter disbelief that someone is actually looking at her like she matters. It didn't take long for Eleanor to completely fall head over heels for Jules, the only person in her miserable life who spoke to her with genuine warmth and respect. Their romance moved at lightning speed, holding hands under the soft glow of light as they dreamed of a bright future together. And her terrible adoptive parents, they jumped at the chance to approve the engagement, thrilled that they could finally wipe their hands clean of her forever. Just when you think things couldn't get more uncomfortably pushy, Jules starts leaning in with his shirt halfway unbuttoned, trying to pressure Eleanor into intimacy before they're even legally hitched. In the bed, Eleanor is clearly uncomfortable and hesitant, trying to tell him she isn't feeling it, but he just brushes off her discomfort with the classic red flag line that she'll get used to it after doing it enough times. Poor Eleanor lies there, suffering in silence, convincing herself that enduring this awkward nightmare is what true love requires. Look at his smug little smirk. He genuinely thinks he's smooth, but Eleanor's facial expression says she'd rather be literally anywhere else. Unable to force herself through it any longer, Eleanor pushes him away with a sharp gasp of utter disgust and honestly good for her. Turning her back on him, she nervously apologizes, claiming she's just not feeling well enough to continue tonight. But instead of showing an ounce of empathy, Jules immediately gets defensive and gaslights her, scoffing that she's making him look like the bad guy. Buttoning up his shirt in a huff, he cold shoulders her and storms off, leaving Eleanor standing alone, still trying to blame herself for not being a good enough partner. Little did she know, her sacrifices were about to be thrown right back in her face in the most ruthless way possible. A few nights later, Eleanor tiptoes down the hallway and peeks through a crack in the door, only to have her heart completely shattered into a million pieces. Gasp! There's Jules, holding her adoptive sister Angela tightly in his arms, while Angela hits her with the world's most cliché "it's not what it looks like" excuse. Eleanor steps fully into the room, tears welling up as she screams at them, demanding to know how they could betray her like this right under her nose. Her voice cracks with pure anguish as she confronts Angela, asking why her sister has to steal the one person she actually cared about when she already has everything else. And what does Jules do? He literally pulls Angela behind him to shield her, coldly telling Eleanor to back off while Eleanor cries out in absolute disbelief. Jules looks her dead in the eye and drops the absolute coldest line, claiming he did love her once until he saw her true nature. He doubles down on the verbal abuse, insulting her intimacy issues and blaming her completely for driving him into the arms of her sister. Talk about an absolute trash-tier fiancé. Frozen in place, tears streaming down her pale face, Eleanor is left completely crushed by the brutally cruel words of the man she trusted. In her inner monologue, she blames herself for being defective, admitting that no matter how hard she tried, physical touch with him only ever filled her with revulsion. Flash forward to the present day at the Count's grand estate, bathed in bright sunlight as life moves on. At the formal dining table, Eleanor calmly swirls a glass of deep red wine, her mind totally made up. Sitting upright with regal grace, she drops a bombshell on her adoptive father, declaring that she has no intention of ever getting married. Bam! The Count's face instantly twists in rage as he slams the table, calling her ungrateful and reminding her that they took her in out of charity. Look at his angry profile. This guy's blood pressure is spiking purely because he realizes his cash cow daughter isn't playing along with his political matchings anymore. Across the long table, the atmosphere turns ice cold as he glares at her, unable to believe she actually defied his authority. He aggressively points his finger, accusing Eleanor of making Angela feel guilty for taking Jules, but Eleanor just smiles internally at the absurdity of it all. Sip. She casually takes a slow drink from her wine glass, completely unbothered by her father's theatrical rage. Setting her glass down with absolute elegance, she decides it's time to take control of her own destiny once and for all. With a calm, venomous poise, she lets him know that if a husband is required, she'll go out and choose one herself. She knows her toxic family just wants to sell her off in a political marriage for profit, but she is officially done being their pawn. Instead, she hits them with a shocking request. She wants permission to attend Angela and Jules' upcoming engagement party. Holding a hand over her heart with an innocent smile, she acts like the picture-perfect noble lady asking for a simple family invitation. We cut to the grand banquet hall filled with crystal chandeliers and high society aristocrats gossiping under the bright lights. Gorgeous blue floral decorations line the hall, setting up a breathtaking visual contrast for Eleanor's dramatic reemergence into society. Standing amidst the blue blossoms, Eleanor looks like absolute royalty in her stunning blue ball gown. Talk about serving a revenge outfit. Whisper, whisper, the crowd immediately goes wild with hushed gossip as the nobles hide their faces behind fans, shocked to see her in public. Since the engagement was called off, Eleanor had stayed completely out of sight, making her sudden appearance the ultimate jaw-dropper. Touching the sparkling ruby pendant around her neck, Eleanor mentally prepares herself for the wolves waiting in the room. Flashback to her debate with the Count where he originally balked at her attending, stunned that she'd want to go near her ex. But Eleanor had calmly countered that as the older sister, missing the event would only cause even bigger rumors across the nobility. She even gave him a sickly sweet smile, reassuring him that her heart was totally healed, leaving the Count visibly fuming and trapped in his own corner. That's when Angela stepped in with her trademark angelic grin, chirping that she didn't mind her dear sister attending at all. Angela gives her a smug side eye while pretending to play the benevolent sister, totally unaware that Eleanor is playing a much bigger game. Returning to the present, Eleanor stands tall, glowing with total poise and unspoken confidence. Clasping her necklace, she vows in her head to stop living in fear of her parents or tiptoeing around Angela's fake crocodile tears. Suddenly, the entire ballroom goes silent as a strikingly handsome, dark-haired man steps into the room, sending all the noble ladies into an absolute frenzy. The ladies fan themselves frantically, squealing about how drop-dead gorgeous he is and jokes about letting him bite their necks. Eleanor turns her gaze toward him with a cool, analytical stare, completely immune to his mesmerizing aura. Surrounded by swooning noblewomen, the mysterious man turns out to be the legendary Vampire Duke, famous for his otherworldly looks and endless romantic rumors. Sip, swirling her wine glass, Eleanor secretly scoffs at the dramatic nickname, thinking it's ridiculous people call such a stunning man a monster. Watching him charm the surrounding crowd with a smooth smile, she notes to herself that the rumors about him being a total womanizer are definitely accurate. Ever wonder what happens when the most infamous Playboy Duke in the kingdom locked eyes with a woman who had zero interest in romance? Well, grab your popcorn, because our girl Eleanor is about to give this man the ultimate reality check. Looking around the crowded ballroom, Eleanor can feel the heavy weight of dozens of judgmental stares burning into her back, but she keeps her composure intact. She swiftly turns away with an icy cold shoulder, refusing to give the whispering aristocrats the dramatic reaction they're desperately dying to see. Murmur, murmur. Over in the center of the hall, the so-called vampire duke is completely swarmed by swooning noblewomen, while Eleanor quietly slips toward the quietest corner of the room. Talk about a total contrast in vibes. Glowing with an almost supernatural aura, the handsome Duke Clive Evans stands out like a main character in a sea of NPCs, casually soaking in all the obsessive attention. Clink! The grand chandelier lights twinkle overhead as high society guests giggle and exchange toxic gossip, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing near the entrance. Standing tall in her shimmering blue gown, Eleanor mentally prepares herself for the arrival of the two people who made her life an absolute living hell. Gasp! Her eyes narrow as two familiar silhouettes break through the crowd. Yep, the toxic duo has officially entered the chat. Arm in arm, her former fiancé Jules and her fake sweet sister Angela stroll up with nauseatingly fake smiles, practically oozing smug arrogance. Jules flashes a patronizing smirk right at her face, acting like he's hot stuff just because he showed up to his own engagement bash with her sister on his arm. Seriously, this guy's ego is larger than the entire mansion. Unbothered by his cheap provocations, Eleanor calls him out directly on his petty narrative, asking if he came over just to dump all the blame on her like always. Whisper, whisper. The surrounding ladies hide their faces behind their decorative fans, giggling over the juicy drama unfolding right before their eyes. A cold drop of sweat trickles down Eleanor's cheek as she realizes just how fast the nasty rumors about her broken engagement have spread across the high nobility. Behind her innocent facade, Angela sneers with pure malice, utterly delighted that Eleanor is currently taking all the public heat. Grab! Angela suddenly snatches Eleanor's hand, putting on a sickeningly sweet show for the crowd while prying into Eleanor's private motives. She chirps loudly enough for everyone to hear it, claiming Eleanor only showed up to stalk some mysterious guy she has her eyes on. Wow, talk about a master class in gaslighting. Angela tops off her act by dramatically declaring her total support for Eleanor, leaving poor Eleanor completely caught off guard by the sheer audacity. But dumb, her heart races as tension suffocates the air. Eleanor knows that the more she tries to deny these ridiculous accusations, the guiltier she'll look to the crowd. Looking at Jules' indifferent face, Eleanor flashes back to the moment they first met, deeply regretting ever letting such an unfeeling snake into her life. A painful memory echoes in her mind of Jules coldly insulting her intimate boundaries and using her trauma as a weak excuse to run into Angela's arms. Absolute trash behavior. Frozen under the harsh spotlight of public judgment, Eleanor feels her throat tighten up, completely unable to utter a single word in her defense. Russell, holding back her bitter tears, she chokes out a fake blessing for their future and hastily turns on her heel to flee the scene. Angela grips Jules' arm even tighter, flashing a downright evil grin as she watches Eleanor run away humiliated. Man, someone really needs to wipe that smug look off her face. Pitter-patter! Eleanor dashes out into the cool night air of the grand garden, her head spinning with self-doubt and overwhelming frustration. Sob! Tears finally spill over her eyelashes as she buries her face in her hands, completely crushed, until a deep, calm voice cuts through the darkness asking why she's crying. Gasp! Startled out of her mind, Eleanor spins around with wide, tear-stained eyes, terrified that someone witnessed her vulnerable moment. Before she can react, a large, warm hand gently rests on her head, offering an unexpected moment of comforting warmth. She looks up in absolute shock to find none other than Duke Clive Evans himself staring down at her with intense red eyes. Without a single word of judgment, the Duke pulls out a pristine silk handkerchief and hands it over to help her wipe away her tears. Dab! Eleanor quickly cleans her face, embarrassed to be seen in such a state, and politely tries to hand the handkerchief back, but Clive smoothly refuses to take it back. What a gentleman! Framed by the soft moonlight, Clive gazes into her eyes with intense focus, demanding to know the real reason behind her tears. Eleanor stammers, completely unsure of how to handle a man who carries such an intimidating, high-ranking presence. She hesitates internally, convinced that a powerful noble like him would only judge her based on the trashy rumors circulating in the ballroom. Closing her eyes, she prepares to give a generic lie just to make him leave her alone. But Clive completely cuts her off, nonchalantly stating that her sister clearly stole her fiancé. Eleanor's jaw literally drops in utter astonishment. How on earth did he guess that so easily? Clive casually breaks down his observation, explaining that anyone with half a brain could see she's the victim here just by watching how her sister gloated over her suffering. Honestly, give this man an award for actual emotional intelligence. He steps closer, speaking her full name with a dark, commanding tone that instantly sends shivers down her spine. Touch. Reaching out, Clive gently lifts her chin with his finger, looking directly into her soul and asking if she wants sweet, glorious revenge against her family. Gulp. Caught up in his undeniable intensity, Eleanor doesn't hesitate for even a second before whispering a firm yes. A dangerous smirk plays on Clive's lips as he leans in, telling her to follow him if she truly wants to flip the script on her abusers. Grab. Without waiting for permission, he takes her by the wrist and leads her through the estate courtyard, leaving Eleanor scrambling to ask where on earth they're going. Her eyes pop wide when he casually drops the bomb that he's taking her straight to his family's private mansion right this instant. Slap! Shocked by his sudden move, Eleanor instantly pulls her hand back with a sharp, defensive snap. Standing her ground under the starry sky, she firmly warns him that she is not the kind of easy woman he probably thinks she is. Clive turns back with a confused tilt of his head, while Eleanor stammers out a dead-honest disclaimer so she doesn't get kicked out onto the streets later. Taking a deep breath, she places her hand over her chest and drops the ultimate plot twist on him. She is completely asexual. Crickets! Clive freezes dead in his tracks, staring at her in total deadpan silence as his brain attempts to process what he just heard. Eleanor lays it all out on the table without holding back, explaining that no matter what a man does, her body feels absolutely zero physical attraction or reaction. She bluntly tells him that pursuing romance with her is a total waste of his precious time, only to watch the formidable vampire Duke burst out into an amused smirk. Clive loses his cool exterior completely, breaking into hilarious, wholehearted laughter while Eleanor stands there looking like a confused chibi. Talk about the most unexpected romance pitch ever. Imagine telling the kingdom's most infamous playboy Duke that you feel zero romantic attraction, only for him to smirk right in your face. Duke Clive Evans looks down at Eleanor and nonchalantly claims that her being asexual actually plays right into his master plan. Eleanor's jaw practically hits the floor as she blinks in utter confusion, asking what on earth he could possibly mean by such a strange comment. Snap! Before she can even process his words, the Duke reaches out and grabs her wrist in a lightning-fast move, pulling her close. He leans in so close that their breath mixes in the cool night air, leaving poor Eleanor completely breathless and short-circuiting. Smooch! Out of absolutely nowhere, the vampire Duke swoops in and steals a sudden, passionate kiss right under the twinkling stars. Talk about a top-tier visual panel. The artist went all out with sparkly lights and rose petals, making this sudden ambush look like something straight out of a fairy tale romance. Badoom! Eleanor's eyes open wide in total shock as her brain completely freezes trying to compute what just happened. Wrapped up in his arms in the middle of the garden, the atmosphere turns crazy intense. But wait, didn't she just say she felt zero romantic attraction? Swish! Pulling back with a smooth smirk, Clive nonchalantly remarks that her startled physical reaction proved his point, while Eleanor angrily demands to know why he just kissed her out of the blue. Panting with flushed cheeks, Eleanor tries to gather her scattered thoughts after taking a direct emotional hit from the kingdom's biggest smooth talker. Fixing him with an icy glare, she firmly puts her foot down, warning him that she's definitely not the kind of woman who's suitable to be his lover. Clive nonchalantly waves off her concern, clarifying that he never had any intention of making her a temporary fling or a late-night casual companion. Staring right into her soul with those intense ruby eyes, the Duke drops the ultimate bomb, asking her straight up if she'll marry him. Eleanor scoffs in disbelief, asking him to stop messing around with such absurd jokes, completely refusing to take his wild proposal seriously. Gasp, but Clive doesn't break eye contact for even a millisecond, assuring her in a deadly quiet voice that he's 100% serious. Standing under the moonlight, the camera zooms out as the Duke seamlessly transitions from playboy mode into full-on business partner mode. He breaks down the terms. It's a strategic contract marriage that will give her the ultimate ticket out of her abusive household and far away from her toxic sister. Staying sharp as a tack, Eleanor doesn't fall for the trap, asking what a powerful Duke like him could possibly gain from marrying an orphan noblewoman with zero status. Clive's eyes narrow with intrigue as he hints that there's a specific invaluable benefit that only Eleanor can provide for him. Suspicious of his vague answers, Eleanor presses him to explain exactly what secret value she holds, but the Duke keeps his cards close to his chest. Honestly, check out the dramatic lighting on those red eyes. The artist always makes this guy look like he's playing three-dimensional chess while everyone else plays checkers. Eleanor crosses her arms, calling him out directly for having the audacity to ask her to sign a lifetime contract without even showing her the full terms first. Turns! With icy composure, she flatly rejects his offer and tells him to go find another noble lady willing to play his game. She coldly points out that a high-ranking duke with drop-dead gorgeous looks must have a line of eager candidates wrapping around the castle block anyway. But Clive isn't letting her go that easily, stepping forward and firmly stating that she is the only person in the entire empire who can fulfill his conditions. Refusing to be manipulated, Eleanor firmly declares that she intends to live a quiet, independent life on her own, brushing past him as he calls out for her to wait. As she walks away into the night, Clive stands silent in the courtyard, remembering the nasty gossip Eleanor's sister was whispering behind her back. A quick flashback highlights Angela's snarky voice, tauntingly asking why a Grand Duke would ever look twice at a disgraced woman like Eleanor. Thud! Back in her private room, Eleanor faceplants onto her bed, completely drained after enduring back-to-back psychological warfare. Staring blankly at the ceiling, the sound of the Duke's serious proposal continues to ring in her ears like an uninvited song stuck on repeat. She rolls her eyes in frustration, muttering to herself about how arrogant he was to think she'd instantly jump at the chance to be his fake bride. Man, you can really see the sheer exhaustion in her blue eyes. Poor girl just wants one single day without high society drama ruining her peace. Knock, knock. Her quiet moment instantly ruined by a soft tap on the door, followed by a voice announcing her sister's arrival. Sitting up with a heavy sigh, Eleanor polishes her composure and gives Angela permission to come inside. Angela strolls in looking like a picture of fake innocence in her nightdress, remarking on how early Eleanor left the ball, while Eleanor bluntly asks why she's visiting so late. Clasping her hands together with a sweet, fragile expression, Angela claims she just had an urgent personal secret to share with her dear sister. Bombshell! With a fake angelic smile, Angela chirps that she has decided not to marry Lord Jules after all. Crash! Eleanor's blood boils as she snaps, angrily calling out Angela for stealing her fiancé, ruining her reputation, and now casually throwing the guy away like trash. Angela quickly raises her hands in defense, telling Eleanor to calm down, and clarifying that she isn't dumping Jules forever, just postponing the marriage for a year. When Eleanor demands why, Angela flashes a sinister, smug smile, revealing that now that she's officially an adult, her social horizon has expanded. Angela proudly brags that she can now hunt for higher-ranking noblemen, leaving Eleanor internally screaming at her sister's disgusting, hypocritical greed. Grip? Clenching her nightgown so hard her knuckles turn white, Eleanor burns with sheer disgust, realizing she was humiliated and betrayed for someone this shallow. Talk about a masterclass in villainy. Angela's fake innocent expression paired with those snake-like motives makes you want to punch the screen. Angela tilts her head with condescending pity, pretending to feel sorry for Eleanor's supposedly hopeless future in noble society. Gasp! She then drops the ultimate insult, spitefully claiming that a 25-year-old single woman with a broken engagement is basically classified as leftover garbage. Tap, tap. Taking slow, deliberate steps closer, Angela continues to unleash her psychological poison, trying to break Eleanor's spirit once and for all. Whisper. Leaning right into Eleanor's ear, Angela spitefully sneers that no matter how pretty her jewels are, no nobleman will ever marry a fake, adopted orphan sister. Having delivered her toxic reality check, Angela flashes one last fake sweet smile, wishing her good night before casually strutting out of the room. Left standing alone in the dark shadows, Eleanor clutches her necklace, her eyes burning with a newly ignited fire for absolute revenge. Meanwhile, back in his dark, majestic library, Duke Clive Evans gazes at a secret document under the moonlight, already orchestrating his next move to win her over. Ever wondered what happens when the Empire's most notorious playboy duke sets his eyes on an outcast noblewoman? Duke Clive Evans sits in his dim study, staring down at a confidential report, while the image of Eleanor Topaz floats in his mind, already piecing together his next tactical move. Stepping up to his grand floor-to-ceiling windows, Clive gazes out into the tranquil night, looking like a mastermind plotting his next major conquest on the high society chessboard. Check out those glowing crimson eyes. The artist really went all out with the dramatic lighting here. Clive's expression is deadly serious, proving this man is definitely not playing games anymore. Whoosh! Under the vast, starry sky, the Duke's towering castle stands under the moonlight as he quietly vows to himself that he will never let Eleanor slip through his fingers. Sunshine crash! Morning breaks over the estate as rays of brilliant golden sunlight flood Eleanor's lavish bedroom, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Staring at her reflection in the vanity mirror, poor Eleanor is practically hyperventilating, having tossed and turned all night knowing the formidable Duke Clive is coming over today. Sitting right on her wooden desk is the official letter from the Duke himself, bearing his formal seal and looking like a ticking time bomb. The message is straightforward. Clive politely requests another private discussion regarding their proposed contract marriage, confirming his arrival at the Topaz Mansion. Eleanor can't help but overthink the entire situation, wondering why on earth a high-ranking noble with infinite wealth and status would go out of his way to pursue an orphaned woman like her. Honestly, her blue and white dress paired with that teardrop ruby necklace is such a clean aesthetic. She stares into the glass, trying to assemble her mental armor before facing the beast. A bitter memory flashes through her mind as she recalls Lord Jules and her toxic sister Angela, mocking her behind her back, labeling her as damaged goods who could never fulfill marital expectations. Smirk! A sudden surge of petty satisfaction hits her as she realizes just how utterly speechless those two snakes would be if she actually became the Grand Duchess. Tap! She sets her comb down on the table, instantly shaking off the temptation and reminding herself that Clive is a famous playboy whose proposal is probably just a temporary pastime. Pulling back her chair with a sharp snap, Eleanor prepares her composure, determined to stay grounded no matter what smooth lines he throws her way. Surrounded by soft pastel blossoms, she fixes her gaze ahead, swearing to herself that she won't be manipulated by his charming mask. Clink, cut to the glorious Topaz estate bathed in bright daylight as a servant pours hot, steaming tea into fine porcelain cups for the high-stakes tea party. Sitting across the table, Clive gets straight to business, asking if she's reconsidered his contract proposal, only for Eleanor to firmly shut him down because she's sick of being manipulated by men. Swoon! Look at how casually Clive leans back in his velvet chair. He smoothly points out that a business arrangement means no emotional complications. Plus, it gives her total immunity from her toxic sister and sweet revenge against her ex. Eleanor falls into dead silence, her skepticism fighting against the fact that every single point he just made was absolute facts. Swish! Closing the distance, Clive leans forward across the table, bringing his sharp aura right into her personal space without breaking eye contact for a single microsecond. Fixing him with a sharp look, Eleanor demands to know why he's pushing this so desperately, admitting she can't fathom his hidden motives. Clive smirks slightly, playfully asking if she'd actually agree to marry him if he laid all his secret cards out on the table right now. Thud! Before she can even answer, Clive aggressively stands up and surges forward across the tea table, sending Eleanor's heart into overdrive. Eleanor's eyes go wide in complete shock as his face hovers just inches from hers. Talk about zero personal space boundaries. Gentle touch. Reaching out with slender fingers, Clive tenderly cups the teardrop gem on her necklace, declaring that this very stone is the real reason he needs her. Eleanor stammers in complete bewilderment, completely thrown off guard by the sudden mention of her favorite piece of jewelry. Clive steps back and explains that the gem around her neck is actually the sacred ruby, a legendary heirloom of the Evans Duchy that vanished generations ago during his father's reign. Eleanor processes the bombshell reveal with a doubtful squint, asking how he can be so certain that her necklace is actually his family's long-lost ancient treasure. A sweet flashback panel shows baby Eleanor nestled in a woven basket, holding tight to that exact red gem the day she was left at the orphanage. Taking a calm sip of his tea, Clive explains that the stolen relic was likely pawned off decades ago, ending up in her hands, but its unique brilliance is impossible for him to mistake. Check out the detailed shoujo sparkle effect in this close-up. The production quality on Clive's character design is seriously absurd. Boom! Delivering the ultimate line with a smirk, Clive nonchalantly tells her that she's the first woman to ever truly capture his interest, meaning marrying her secures both his dream bride and his family heirloom in one move. Taking another relaxed sip, he leans back with supreme confidence, casually asking if that doesn't sound like the most lucrative business deal she's ever heard. Eleanor lowers her chin, admitting internally that while this arrangement fixes literally all her life problems, trusting a man this calculating feels like walking right into a bear trap. Looking him dead in the eye, she poses the most awkward question possible. What does he plan to do about producing an heir for his duchy? She reminds him point blank of her condition, reiterating that physical intimacy is completely off the table for her due to her physical aversion. Eleanor keeps her posture rigid and defensive, preparing herself for him to pull back or demand compromise like every other nobleman would. Clive doesn't even blink, casually waving off her concern and revealing that he has zero intention of forcing anything, planning to simply adopt an heir instead. Overthinking mode! Eleanor's eyes widen as her brain immediately spirals, suspecting that a high-profile playboy like him claiming he won't touch her just means he'll seek side mistresses elsewhere. Clive smirks at her flustered expression, asking if she's finally ready to say yes, but Eleanor quickly requests a little more time to process the sheer madness of his deal. Setting his teacup down with smooth grace, the Duke flashes a charming smile, assuring her that she can take all the time she needs, since he knows she'll eventually give him the answer he wants. Left alone in her massive room after his departure, Eleanor paces around, wrestling with the overwhelming benefits versus the massive risk of trusting Duke Clive. Knock, knock. Her deep train of thought is interrupted by a rap at the door, forcing her to clear her head and invite the visitor inside. Bam! The door swings open and in walks Lord Jules, wearing an obnoxious smile and holding a massive bouquet of bright yellow roses like he didn't just ruin her life. Eleanor's mood instantly drops to sub-zero, staring at her ex-fiancé with an icy glare that could freeze a volcano solid. Flop? Without an invitation, Jules casually sprawls across her plush couch like he owns the place, shamelessly commenting that they're practically family now, so she should loosen up. Angry Chibi. A hilarious Chibi pop-up shows Eleanor boiling with rage, internally screaming at the absolute audacity of this guy after his disgraceful behavior at the ball. Jules keeps rambling on, admitting that he actually came over to see her sister Angela, but got turned away at the front gates. Dramatic sob! Look at his ridiculous puppy dog expression. Jules complains about how he bought this special rose bouquet specifically for Angela, only to get completely rejected. Slumping back against the cushions, Jules whines that this is the third time in a row Angela has ghosted him, asking Eleanor if she knows what's going on. Completely blind to the fact that he was thrown out like trash the second Angela set her sights on higher prey. Imagine dealing with an ex who gets dumped by your sister and immediately barges into your room expecting a therapy session. Eleanor stares at Jules with absolute disbelief, deadpan asking if he seriously showed up just to complain about his failed date. Jules throws his hands up in full drama queen mode, insisting that this is a total crisis and claiming she's the only one who truly understands him. Talk about delusional. Eleanor turns her side profile with maximum coldness, quietly reminding this man that after everything he pulled, they aren't exactly on buddy-buddy terms to be sharing deep emotional heart-to-hearts. Pointing at the oversized floral bouquet resting on the table, she dryly adds that Angela would probably lose her mind if she saw her prize suitor hanging out in her sister's bedroom. Intense stare. Jules zeroes in on her with those golden eyes, completely oblivious to how awkward and unwelcome his sudden presence really is. Eagle eye. Jules smirks with ultimate audacity, popping up a smug little chibi expression to ask if she's just jealous, causing Eleanor to roll her eyes so hard she nearly sees her own brain. Pushing back from her space, Eleanor bluntly tells him to pack up his hurt feelings and take the nearest exit before she loses her remaining patience. Swish! She dismissively waves her hand toward the door like she's brushing away a buzzing fly. Honestly, her unbothered attitude is an absolute masterclass in dealing with exes. Jules pauses at the threshold, whining about whether she's really not even going to walk him out, but Eleanor reminds him cold turkey that their engagement is officially buried in the past. Snap. Offended to his core, Jules spitefully sneers that her ice-cold personality is why no man will ever marry her, only for Eleanor to drop a casual bombshell, announcing that she is, in fact, getting married.
Gasp! Jules' smug facade completely crumbles as Eleanor leans in with a razor-sharp smirk, dropping the news that her wedding might happen way sooner than anyone expects.
Standing under the brilliant sunlight with her teardrop ruby gem gleaming, Eleanor looks like an absolute queen who just delivered a legendary comeback. Glimmer! The grand interior of the estate glitters under the daytime rays, setting the perfect, dramatic atmosphere for this total power move. Repeating her jaw-dropping announcement, Eleanor leaves Jules utterly frozen in place while his brain frantically tries to process what just happened. Stunning! Check out the lighting in this panel. The pastel pink glow around her blue dress gives her such an ethereal, untouchable vibe while she puts him in his place. Stammer? Jules stutters in complete shock, sweating bullets as he desperately demands to know if she's actually telling the truth or just bluffing. Bathed in radiant golden light near the window, Eleanor confirms with supreme composure that every single word she said is 100% genuine. Clutched in his hands, that ridiculous rose bouquet now looks like a symbol of his total defeat as he stands there looking utterly clueless. Turning her back on him, Eleanor coldly tells him that he can believe whatever he wants, but she's far too exhausted to waste another second arguing. Rage brewed, veins practically popping on his forehead, Jules aggressively demands to know which nobleman managed to steal her away from him. Eleanor keeps her posture rigid and dignified, calmly declaring that she has zero obligation to share her personal life with an ex. Spiraling. Jules' ego takes a massive hit as he spirals internally, wondering how on earth a woman who was obsessed with him a week ago found someone else so fast. Scoff! Trying to rebuild his shattered pride, Jules convinces himself that this whole marriage story is just a desperate act to get his attention. Standing tall in the doorway, he chuckles arrogantly, telling her that her little jealousy trap is far too transparent and careless. Smirk? Eleanor's subtle expression here is hilarious. She's practically watching a clown perform a whole circus routine in her living room. Jules winks smugly, boasting that real men don't fall for cheap psychological games like pretending to marry someone else. Eleanor stares at him with total deadpan exhaustion, utterly amazed by the sheer level of delusion required to construct that fantasy in his mind. Dramatic pause. Jules sighs dramatically, claiming that while he can't return her obsessive feelings, they can at least try to be polite. Thud! He casually tosses the bouquet of yellow roses right into her hands, condescendingly telling her that they should just try getting along as future in-laws. Turning on his heel, Jules struts toward the grand entrance like he just won an argument, completely unaware of how foolish he actually looked. With a smooth wave over his shoulder, he flashes a final condescending grin and bids her farewell before stepping out. Bam! The heavy wooden doors slam shut, instantly cutting off his toxic energy and leaving the room in blissful quiet once again. Pushing her hair back, Eleanor lets out a massive breath, muttering to herself that dealing with him was hands down the most draining experience of her week. Exhausted. Look at her expression here. The artist captured that post-interaction mental fatigue so realistically, every introvert in the audience can feel her pain. Retreating to her velvet armchair, Eleanor opens a book, trying to regain her composure amidst the peaceful afternoon light. Staring down at the pages, her mind drifts back to her bold declaration, secretly worrying if she acted too rashly by using marriage as a weapon. A vision of Duke Clive floats through her thoughts as she reminds herself that marrying into top-tier nobility brings massive political responsibility that can't be taken lightly. Letting out another heavy sigh, she sinks deeper into her seat, wrestling with whether the benefits of Clive's proposal outweigh the terrifying risks. Clink! Breaking the silence, her faithful maid Jane enters the room carrying a silver tray with fresh tea for her mistress. Setting down the porcelain, Jane looks at her with genuine concern, asking if her health is all right since she looks completely drained. Eleanor gives a weak smile, admitting she's just worn out from an unwelcome visitor and asking for 2 extra sugar cubes to cope with the stress. Pour! Steaming hot, dark tea streams smoothly into the ornate blue cup, creating a cozy and relaxing atmosphere in the room. Jane carefully pours the brew, maintaining a respectful and comforting presence, while Eleanor tries to unfry her brain. Set down! The teacup clinks softly against the saucer, bringing a moment of calm to an otherwise hectic and chaotic morning. Looking up at her trusted maid, Eleanor casually poses a life-changing question, asking if Jane would follow her if she ended up marrying into another noble house. Surprise! Jane's eyes widen in shock as she pauses mid-step, caught completely off guard by such an unexpected inquiry out of nowhere. Recovering her composure, Jane timidly asks if the wild rumors about Duke Clive Evans proposing to her are actually true after all. Eleanor blinks in surprise, realizing internally that high society gossip travels faster than lighting if even the household servants already know. Taking a thoughtful sip, Eleanor confirms the rumors are real, prompting Jane to excitedly ask if she's already accepted the Duke's grand proposal. Cliffhanger. With a calm and calculated glance, Eleanor reveals that while she hasn't officially given her answer yet, she's definitely considering saying yes, setting up an absolute showdown for the next chapter. Imagine thinking you've finally gotten a quiet moment to breathe, only to realize the real drama in the estate is just getting started. Eleanor sits in graceful silence, but you can tell her brain is running 1,000,000 miles an hour. Twitch! Jane fidgets nervously by the side, looking like someone who's holding in the biggest piece of gossip in the entire kingdom, prompting Eleanor to gently call out her name. Leaning in with utter seriousness, Jane drops her polite maid persona for a second to softly ask if Duke Clive can actually be trusted. Dramatic reveal! Jane whispers that just a short while ago, she caught Lady Angela lurking in the courtyard, getting way too close and personal with the Duke. Talk about a red flag popping up in 4K resolution. Eleanor's blue eyes narrow as the harsh reality hits. Her snake of a stepsister is already trying to make her move. Evil glow! A sinister vision of Angela holding up her fan pops into Eleanor's head, remembering how Angela will literally use every dirty trick in the book to steal whatever Eleanor has, just like she did with Jules. Jane continues her report, mentioning that while she couldn't hear every single word, Angela was definitely pushing the boundaries of personal space. Clingy mode. Flashback vision shows Angela dramatically grabbing onto Clive's arm with that fake innocent smile. Seriously, does this girl have a secret radar for whenever Eleanor gets a high-tier suitor? Squirm! Flustered to her core, Jane stammers that she just wants to protect her mistress from getting her heart broken again, touching Eleanor deeply with her loyalty. Taking a calm sip of her tea, Eleanor offers a serene smile and assures her faithful maid that everything is completely under control. Gazing out the bright window, Eleanor quietly declares that Duke Clive isn't the type of man who can be so easily manipulated by Angela's cheap tactics. Sneaky sister! Meanwhile, down in the courtyard, Angela struts around in her puffy pink dress, scoffing internally that there's no way a high and mighty Duke would settle for Eleanor when she's standing right here. Glimmer! Spotting Clive standing among the dark roses like a walking dark romance cover model, Angela's eyes instantly light up with pure greed. Turning on her maximum charm, Angela gracefully introduces herself as the second daughter of House Topaz, acting like she just accidentally stumbled upon him. Look at that sickly sweet smile. She tilts her head and bats her eyelashes, trying her absolute hardest to look like a delicate flower. Delusional thinking. Angela calculates her next move, convincing herself that men only fall for soft, fragile maidens, and that Eleanor's rigid personality will bore the Duke in no time. She mentally snorts, telling herself that a boring woman who only relies on her face won't keep a man's interest for long. The irony here is so thick you could slice it with a sword. Cold shoulder. Clive barely even glares at her, deadpan replying that he didn't come here to chat with her, but was actually looking for her sister. Ouch! That cold response hit harder than a freight train. Sweat drops. Angela's brain completely short-circuits as she freezes in place, internally screaming over why this dark, handsome Duke isn't instantly swooning over her. Clive casually asks if she has an actual message from Eleanor or if she's just wasting his precious time, forcing Angela to awkwardly admit her sister didn't send her.
Clive chuckles softly behind his hand while Angela stands there sweating, her innocent act crumbling faster than wet tissue paper.
Trying to regain control, Angela drops her sweet voice and directly asks if the rumors about him proposing to Eleanor are actually true, and Clive doesn't even hesitate to confirm it. Dark shadow. The light instantly leaves Angela's eyes as a terrifying shadow falls over her face. Her ego just took a lethal critical hit. Confrontation. Surrounding herself with villainous aura, Angela steps closer and demands to know why on earth he would choose Eleanor over everyone else. Clive gives her a side eye that could freeze molten lava, coldly asking what she's even trying to imply.
Putting on her best concerned sister routine, Angela pleads with him to explain his choice before he makes a tragic mistake. Chin rest? She boldly tells him to reconsider his marriage proposal, causing Clive to rest his hand against his face with an amused little "oh." He's literally watching her dig her own grave. Celebration, Angela internally cheers, foolishly thinking she's got him wrapped around her finger and taken the bait. Toxic lies. Spreading venom with a straight face, Angela whispers that Eleanor's past engagement ended strictly because of Eleanor's infidelity. What an unbelievable lie. Fake tears. Pressing her hand against her chest, Angela dramatically lies that Eleanor suffers from a serious mental condition and will definitely cheat on him after they get married. Wiping away imaginary tears, she whines about how much she supposedly cares for her sister's well-being and wants her to recover. Honestly, somebody give this girl an Oscar for best performance in a snake role. Laugh out loud. Clive suddenly bursts into a smooth laugh, covering his mouth as if he just heard the funniest joke of the century. Confused pick-me. Angela blinks in total confusion, completely missing the fact that he's laughing at her, not with her. Clive's laughter vanishes in a split second as his crimson eyes lock onto her, coldly pointing out that she's incredibly skilled at putting on a fake theatrical performance. Lean in. Dropping his voice to a chilling whisper, Clive steps into her personal space to let her know that fake, deceitful women are his absolute biggest pet peeve. Dismissive smirk. Look at his face here. The artist gave Clive the ultimate main character aura while he completely dismantles her entire life strategy. Angela stammers out a weak response, her confidence completely evaporating under his terrifying pressure. Clive casually mocks her ability to pretend to care, breaking down her snake-like nature with surgical precision. Turning his back, he takes a step away, stating that a woman who is all cheap talk with zero substance is downright pathetic. Glaring red eyes, looming over her with an intimidating aura, Clive repeats that he despises shallow liars, leaving Angela frantically claiming he misunderstood her intentions. Desperately trying to salvage her lie, Angela clutches her dress and stammers that she just wants him to know the truth about her sister before it's too late. Unbothered king, Clive turns his head with total composure, declaring that even if every single word she said was true, it wouldn't change his decision one bit. Angela's jaw practically hits the floor as she asks if that means he doesn't even care about genuine love. Stern glare, Clive narrows his eyes, sternly questioning if forcing one's toxic desires onto others is her twisted definition of affection. Sigh. Letting out a quiet sigh, Clive gives her a final, chilling piece of advice. If she values her own future, she better stop trying to drag Eleanor down. Threat. Leaning close, he warns her that every trap she sets for her sister will eventually swing back and destroy her instead, leaving Angela trembling in pure terror. Brush past! Without giving her another glance, Clive smoothly excuses himself and walks away, leaving her standing alone in utter defeat. Clench! Left in the dust, Angela bites her lips so hard it might bleed, her face twisted in pure rage and humiliation. Time skip. A few weeks pass by, and a grand, elegant horse-drawn carriage rolls along the sunlit country road toward a new destination. Queen energy. Sitting comfortably inside the carriage, Eleanor rests her chin on her hand with a calm, resolute look, ready to take on whatever massive challenges wait for her at the Duke's estate. Ever wonder how far someone would go to escape a toxic family? Well, Eleanor is about to take the ultimate leap of faith by agreeing to marry a duke she barely knows. Looking in the mirror with pure, cold determination, she knows there is no turning back once this deal is sealed. Her loyal maid Jane can hardly believe her ears, totally shocked at how fast Eleanor made up her mind to accept the Duke's proposal out of nowhere. Eleanor keeps it 100% real, admitting there isn't a single spark of romance here. This is strictly a strategic exit strategy to ditch her horrible household. She figures if you expect zero love, you can't get your heart broken, leaving poor Jane looking super concerned. Honestly, seeing a heroine treat marriage like a corporate merger is both hilarious and kind of relatable. Meanwhile, over at the Duke's grand estate, Duke Clive sits in his sunlit office, wondering how Eleanor will react when she gives him her final answer. Tap, tap. He adjusts his paperwork, the quiet room filled only with the soft rustle of documents as he waits patiently for her arrival. Glancing toward the door, Clive calculates that his prospective bride should be walking through those doors any minute now. He stands up from his desk to prepare for her arrival, but out of nowhere, something feels completely off in the room's atmosphere. Throb. A sudden, agonizing shock hits him right in the chest, making him gasp out in severe pain. Talk about awful timing. Man is about to host his future wife, and his body decides to hit the panic button. Rattle. The sudden, violently painful spasm sends his heavy wooden chair skidding backward across the floorboards. Slumped over his desk, Clive pants heavily while darkness creeps around him, desperately asking why this curse has to trigger right this second. His eyes flare up with an eerie crimson glow as sweat pours down his face. The art detail on his terrifying expression here is ridiculously cool. The butler casually opens the door to announce Eleanor's arrival, only to completely freeze in sheer terror when he sees his master collapsing. Splatter! Ink splatters across the desk as Clive clutches his face, desperately gasping for his secret medicine before he loses total control. The butler yanks open a hidden desk drawer in a total panic, pulling out a small glass bottle filled with a glowing potion. Gulp! Clive downs the entire vial in one frantic breath, trying to force the surging, painful curse back under control. The butler desperately begs him to cancel the meeting, pointing out how insanely dangerous it is to let anyone see him in this chaotic state. But Clive stubbornly refuses, knowing if he cancels now, Eleanor might change her mind. And honestly, you gotta respect his absolute dedication to closing this deal. Adjusting his tie, Clive insists he still has enough potion to manage, adding that he will have to reveal his dark secret to her eventually anyway. Cut to the lavish drawing room where Eleanor and Clive are finally seated across from each other with tea served between them. With absolute poise, Eleanor looks him dead in the eye and officially confirms that she's ready to leave her home and become his wife. Clive lets out a quiet breath of relief, a faint smile touching his lips now that the woman he wanted is finally agreed. Slide. But before he can celebrate, Eleanor smoothly slides a thick stack of legal documents across the table. She did not come here to play games. Clive's eyebrows raise as he realizes it's a prenuptial contract, chuckling slightly at how overly cautious his bride-to-be is being. Eleanor sternly dictates that he can't use mistresses or petty excuses to kick her out down the line, provided she gets proper housing and financial support. Look at her protecting her assets like a boss. Clive tries to assure her that would never happen, but Eleanor casually shuts him down, pointing out that nobody can predict the crazy future. Crash! Clive takes a sip of his tea, but mid-swallow, the painful curse strikes his chest again, causing the teacup to slip straight from his fingers. Shatter! The porcelain cup smashes onto the floor into a million pieces, prompting a startled Eleanor to jump up in shock. Collapsing onto one knee, Clive forcefully warns her not to step any closer while breathing heavily. Man is literally fighting for his life in front of his new fiancée. Holding his chest, Clive stammers out that he suffers from a severe chronic condition while downing another dose of medicine, turning down her offer to get a doctor. Forcing himself back onto his feet, Clive brushes off the dramatic incident like it was just a minor inconvenience. With his crimson eyes locked onto her, he asks if signing this document officially seals their marriage contract right here and now. Swish! Before Eleanor can even process what just happened, Clive grabs a pen and aggressively signs his name on the dotted line. Holding up the signed agreement, he calmly announces that she's officially a member of the prestigious Evans family now. Clive casually transitions into discussing moving arrangements and the wedding ceremony, acting like he didn't just smash a teacup 2 minutes ago. Eleanor cuts right through the small talk, demanding to know the actual details of this chronic illness since she's going to be his legal wife. She reasonably points out Clive knowing his condition could save his life during an emergency, making him pause in deep thought. Realizing she's bound to discover it eventually, Clive decides it's better to show her the truth right now and bids her to follow him. He leads her through the grand hallways, stopping directly in front of a massive, ominous set of locked wooden doors. Creak! Unlocking the heavy latch, Clive reveals a dark passageway, explaining that the quickest way to understand his condition is to head down into the basement. Whoosh! A chilly air sweeps through as they step onto the damp stone steps, Clive lighting a single candle to cut through the eerie darkness. Descending deeper into the abyss, Eleanor internally panics, wondering what kind of horror movie setup she just walked into. She carefully grips her dress, trying to keep her cool while following him down the endless stone staircase. Flicker, blowout. Just as Clive announces they've arrived, a sudden gust of wind blows out the candle flame, plunging them into absolute pitch darkness. Freaking out, Eleanor urges them to head back upstairs, but Clive grabs her arm and firmly insists on moving forward. When Eleanor complains that walking in total darkness is super dangerous, Clive deadpan replies that she doesn't need to walk at all and swoops in. Princess Carrie! Before she can even protest, Clive lifts her right off her feet into a classic bridal carry, telling her not to struggle unless she wants to fall. He pushes open a final door to reveal a massive, breathtakingly dark Gothic bedroom hiding under the estate. Eleanor stands there utterly flustered and bewildered, questioning why on earth his personal bedroom is hidden deep inside a secret basement dungeon. Eleanor looks up at Clive in confusion, asking why his private bedroom is buried deep inside a pitch-black basement where sunlight never reaches. Remembering the dark rumors surrounding the vampire Duke, she nervously jokes about whether he's secretly a monster lurking in the dark. Clive gets a dangerous, mischievous glint in his eyes, teasingly asking if she'd immediately turn around and run away if he confirmed her suspicions. Eleanor keeps it completely realistic, pointing out that obviously she'd run. Getting her blood drained by a creature of the night sounds like a guaranteed death sentence. Pulling her tight against his chest, Clive softly whispers that she wouldn't suffer at all, cheekily asking how she'd react if he said it only brought pure pleasure. Trying to maintain her composure, Eleanor demands he stop fooling around and explain his condition, only for Clive to drop a massive bomb. He'll die in 2 years unless he drinks her blood. Eleanor's mind completely short-circuits as she tries to process the wild claim that her blood is literally his only lifeline. Clive gently reaches out, his fingers slowly brushing toward her collarbone as the tension in the room reaches a boiling point. Leaning in so close she can feel the heat of his breath, Clive locks his intense red gaze onto her neck, leaving Eleanor totally paralyzed. With his eyes flaring up, Clive moves his lips right against her exposed skin. Talk about maximum drama in a basement dungeon. In a super intense moment, Clive presses his face against her throat, leaving her completely breathless and flustered. Clive looks into her eyes with heavy red eyes, repeating that without her blood, his life will end in under 2 years. Eleanor stammers out her confusion, utterly unable to wrap her head around why her blood specifically holds the key to saving his life. Clive's hand glides down smoothly, preparing to prove to her that his desperate words aren't just an elaborate lie. Bringing his mouth back toward her collarbone, Clive leans in close enough to make her heart skip a beat. Crunch! Out of nowhere, Clive sinks his teeth straight into her neck. Eleanor lets out a gasp of shock as a sharp sting hits her collarbone. Blood trickles down her neck as Clive drinks, sending a strange, overwhelming rush of heat coursing through Eleanor's body. Eleanor's eyes widen in sheer amazement as the initial pain vanishes into a surprisingly warm, tingling sensation that leaves her trembling. She internally freaks out, suddenly realizing this exact sensation feels terrifyingly familiar to something she went through once before. Satisfied, Clive slowly pulls back, cradling Eleanor as her knees give out from the sheer physical shock of the encounter. Eleanor gasps for air, her blue eyes wide with shock as she struggles to catch her breath after such an intense experience. Clive steps back smoothly, releasing his grip as if he didn't just bite his fiancée in a secret dungeon. Eleanor clutches her collarbone in complete disbelief, her head spinning as she tries to figure out what just happened to her. Clive casually states the facts flat out, nonchalantly announcing that he just drank her blood like it's a regular Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor demands a real answer, completely baffled by his unbothered attitude after literally biting her neck. Clive gives her a cold, stern look, asking how she can still be confused after experiencing his thirst firsthand. Dropping the ultimate lore drop, Clive reveals that he is actually a half-vampire carrying both human and vampire blood in his veins. Eleanor squints in suspicion, asking if he's pulling off some elaborate, ridiculous prank just to freak her out. Clive deadpans that he isn't joking around, reminding her that he literally just took a bite out of her neck right in front of her. Eleanor stares down at her hand where fresh blood remains, her mind forced to accept that this fantasy nightmare is 100% real. Eleanor brings up the historical facts, pointing out that the late Duke Evans was a legendary hero who exterminated vampires, so how could his own son be one? Clive's expression darkens as he turns away, coldly revealing a massive family secret. The former Duke wasn't his real biological father. He reveals that 28 years ago, his mother had a secret affair with another man and became pregnant with him. Tragically, his mother took her own life right after giving birth, leaving the former Duke to raise another man's child as his legitimate heir. The ultimate plot twist? Clive drops the bomb that his real biological father, his mother's secret lover, was actually a pure-blooded vampire king. Outside, thunder cracks dramatically across the dark sky, mirroring the insane family tea being spilled in the basement below. Clive recalls his traumatizing childhood, remembering the exact day the late Duke walked in and found young Clive covered in blood with glowing crimson eyes. Despite receiving a royal order to purge all vampires, the late Duke kept Clive's true identity secret and wiped out the rest of the pure-blooded vampire clan instead. The late Duke foolishly assumed that if he erased strictly every pure-blood vampire at the source, young Clive would somehow magically turn into a regular human boy. But nature couldn't be erased. As Clive grew older, his insatiable thirst for blood only intensified, racking his chest with agonizing spasms whenever he fought it. Clive explains that temporary potions barely keep his bloodlust in check, warning that without a constant supply of her blood, he'll turn into a mindless beast within a year. Eleanor stands there in total shock, struggling to digest the heavy, tragic backstory of the intimidating Duke standing right before her. Seeing her obvious doubt, Clive snatches a sharp butter knife off the table without hesitation. Slash! To prove his point in the most dramatic way possible, Clive casually slices a deep gash right across his own neck. Eleanor covers her mouth in horror, screaming out as blood spills out from the self-inflicted wound. She frantically yells at him to stop the bleeding, completely panicked by his terrifying demonstration. Unbothered, Clive wipes the blood away as glowing particles surround his neck, completely sealing up the cut without leaving a single scar. Looking down at her, Clive casually explains that vampires possess lightning-fast regeneration that heals shallow wounds in seconds. Eleanor's jaw drops as she realizes there's no denying the truth anymore. The man in front of her is a genuine supernatural vampire. Gathering her courage, Eleanor nervously asks what he'd do if she decided to cancel the prenuptial agreement right now, and Clive chillingly promises that he'd kill her on the spot. Swish! Imagine threatening to cancel your engagement only for your secret vampire fiancé to slam you against the wall and lock your wrists in place? Eleanor barely has time to blink before Clive gets completely up close and personal, making her totally freak out. Hovering just inches from her face, Clive leans in with that dangerous, heart-stopping intensity and basically demands to know what her next move is going to be. Like, bro, give the girl some personal space for once. Sweating bullets, Eleanor desperately tries to wriggle out of his grasp and tells him to back off. But Clive just flashes a sinister little smirk and asks if she knows how the natural world actually works. Cue the dramatic animal metaphor panel. Clive straight up compares their situation to a dark panther stalking an innocent little bunny, explaining that a predator literally can't resist chasing down prey that tries to run away. Roar! Honestly, the artist went full National Geographic with this panel choice, and I am kinda living for it. Eleanor glares right back at him with those sharp blue eyes, calling him out directly and asking if he's really treating her like his personal hunting target right now. With zero hesitation, Clive gives her a mischievous look and confirms that, yeah, she's definitely his prey. Then he leans in even closer, catching her completely off guard as her heart does a total backflip. Surrounding them with dramatic romance roses, Clive brings up her earlier claim about being completely uninterested in intimacy. He offers her a sweet deal: marry him, live in absolute billionaire luxury, and never have to perform any wifely duties whatsoever. Squeeze! Firmly gripping her hand, Clive leans his face right down toward her neck and drops the actual catch. In exchange for all that luxury, he just needs to take a little sip of her blood every now and then. Talk about a very literal blood tax. Whisper! He softly reminds her that getting a tiny bit of blood drained is way better than getting murdered right here in a basement dungeon, leaving poor Eleanor completely breathless and panting against him. Rose petals float through the air as Eleanor unexpectedly takes a deep breath and tells him he doesn't need to threaten her at all. She'll freely give him as much blood as he wants. Wait, did she really just agree to be an all-you-can-eat vampire buffet? Twitch! Clive's eyes snap wide in shock. Pinning her arms above her head, Eleanor casually explains that marrying a vampire instead of a human isn't even a deal-breaker for her, so he can let her go now. Clive literally freezes in complete disbelief, looking at her side profile with his jaw nearly hitting the floor. Seeing a male lead get completely thrown off by a female lead's unbothered reaction is honestly peak comedy. Gasp! With a deadpan expression, Eleanor asks if he'll finally let go of her wrists, leaving Clive totally speechless as his glowing red eyes widen in pure amazement. Switching back to a wide shot of the dark, gothic basement bedroom, Clive stands over her as Eleanor sits calmly on the massive bed, forcing him to ask if she's actually serious about being okay with all of this. Gently touching her own collarbone, Eleanor sighs and logically reasons that losing a tiny bit of blood once in a while isn't going to kill her, so why make a huge scene? Click! Under the dim glow of the vintage bedroom lamp, Eleanor turns to him and asks if that covers every single detail they needed to negotiate before their wedding, and Clive can only nod along quietly. Sitting up tall with total boss energy, Eleanor fixes her gaze on him and officially declares that their contract marriage deal is locked in. Clive stares at her in absolute silence, completely stunned that this girl just turned a life-or-death vampire encounter into a routine business transaction. Sunshine! Cut to the next morning. The scene brightens up dramatically as morning sunlight pours into a magnificent pastel-colored bedroom suite back up in the main estate mansion. Eleanor lies in her luxurious bed, throwing her hand over her forehead and groaning about how she couldn't sleep a single wink after the crazy nightmare of a night she just had. Sitting up in her floral nightgown, she takes a moment to process everything, knowing her life has completely flipped upside down overnight. Clink. Shortly after, Eleanor sits down across from Clive in a dazzling sunlit drawing room for tea. Clive takes control of the situation, telling her to leave all the wedding prep to him while she just sits back and waits. Glow. His crimson eyes flare up with absolute seriousness as he delivers one crucial warning. She must keep his secret vampire identity hidden from the entire world no matter what. A heavy, dark aura surrounds the panel as Clive reminds her that if his true identity ever gets leaked, she'll end up on the execution block right alongside him as his legal wife. Eleanor looks out the window thoughtfully, internally shrugging off the threat. To her, dealing with a vampire husband is a small price to pay if it means finally escaping her toxic stepfamily. Knock, knock! Suddenly, the maid steps into the room bearing a letter on a silver tray, announcing an invitation from Marchioness Melania itself. Next thing we know, we're transported to an opulent outdoor garden tea party where the highest-ranking noblewomen of the empire are gathered around a dessert-filled table. Sipping her tea, Eleanor reflects on how fast everything is moving. One day she's making a contract with a vampire duke, and the next she's thrown straight into the lion's den of high society. Shadow! Enter Marchioness Melania, the undisputed queen of high society gossip. As the narration reveals, her tea parties are strictly reserved for the gossipy elite who dictate every social scandal in the kingdom. Look at the sinister background shading. You just know she's standard-issue high society trouble. Eleanor takes another nervous sip, sweating as she wonders why on earth she was even invited here in the first place, silently praying that no one knows about her secret engagement yet. Clap! A cute green-haired noble girl claps her hands in delight, gushing about how thrilled she is to be attending the Marchioness's exclusive party today. Turning to Eleanor, the girl mentions that even though they haven't talked much, she spotted Eleanor at the infamous engagement party the other day. Flashback. Eleanor's face drops as she recalls the public humiliation of watching Keister flaunt Angela right in front of her eyes. Yup, social memory in this kingdom is terrifyingly sharp. Setting her teacup down, the green-haired girl chirps about how she used to avoid parties because of her shyness, but now she plans to jump head-first into the social scene. As the girl rambles on happily about seeing Eleanor more often, Eleanor sits back with a serious look, realizing that as the future Duchess Evans, navigating this social minefield is unavoidable. Gasp! Suddenly, Marchioness Melania interrupts with a sharp, piercing stare, leaning in to ask if Eleanor's new partner will be accompanying her to future events. Boom! Drop the mic! The Marchioness drops a massive truth bomb right in front of everyone, loudly bringing up Eleanor's broken engagement with Keister and flat out asking if she's marrying Duke Evans. Eleanor's eyes widen in sheer panic as a cold sweat breaks out on her neck. Whisper. The whole table instantly erupts into shocked gasps. The pink-haired girl and green-haired girl stammer in confusion, wondering how Eleanor jumped from Lord Keister to the Grand Duke so fast, while Eleanor freaks out over word traveled this fast. Dark speed lines fill the screen as Eleanor grips her seat, realizing that rumors were bound to fly after such a high-profile breakup. Smirk, pouring fuel on the fire, the Marchioness takes a slow sip of tea and snidely claims that Duke Evans was the sole reason Eleanor dumped Keister in the first place. The whole garden goes dead silent as the ladies gasp in complete scandal. Eleanor immediately pushes back, asking what kind of wild nonsense she's spouting, but the Marchioness just smirks mockingly and tells her there's no point playing dumb. Point! Leaning forward with venomous confidence, the Marchioness accuses Eleanor of secretly meeting Duke Evans behind Keister's back and stealing the Duke away from her sister Angela. Cue the dramatic Angela reveal in Eleanor's mind. Lightning! The pieces immediately fit together in Eleanor's head. She realizes Angela fed this fake villain story directly to the Marchioness, using the Queen of Gossip to turn all of high society against her. Wow, Angela's weaponized playing the victim is truly next-level evil. Dark purple boxes fill the panel as Eleanor realizes Angela deliberately crafted a convenient lie to paint Eleanor as the ultimate scheming villainess. Pressure. Surrounded by heavy, suffocating dark energy, Eleanor knows that if she shows even a tiny sliver of hesitation or fear right now, she'll fall right into Angela's trap. Standing tall with unwavering composure, Eleanor looks the Marchioness dead in the eyes and calmly admits that yes, she and Duke Evans are indeed getting married. Silence. Then, with total authority, Eleanor sets the record straight. She firmly declares that Duke Evans never had an ounce of affection for Angela, that her broken engagement had nothing to do with him, and that Angela's story is an absolute baseless lie. The Marchioness's face twists in anger as she harshly demands if Eleanor is calling her own sister a liar. But Eleanor stands her ground, knowing damn well that Angela lies as naturally as she breathes. Mic drop. Eleanor internally smirks at how Angela tricks everyone with her fake innocent act, leaving the entire tea table completely stunned and speechless as the truth bomb detonates across high society. Eleanor looks the Marchioness straight in the eye and tells her that if she refuses to believe the truth, she can go ask Duke Evans directly. The Marchioness narrows her eyes in cold silence, whispering a chilling agreement. Closing her eyes with a snort, the Marchioness sinisterly warns that they'll soon discover who's telling the truth and who's a liar, leaving Eleanor to walk away without batting an eye. Arriving back at her family mansion, the butler greets Eleanor at the front entrance, completely oblivious to the chaotic storm brewing inside. Uh-oh. As she steps through the grand doorway, Eleanor can't help but worry about what kind of absurd rumors her toxic family might start spreading next. Honestly, dealing with high society drama is exhausting enough, but dealing with a villainous stepfamily? Absolute headache. Walking up the grand spiral staircase, Eleanor sighs, knowing any drama created by her family could cause unnecessary trouble for her new vampire Duke fiancé. Wah! Suddenly, the echoing sound of dramatic sobbing bounces off the marble walls, instantly catching Eleanor off guard. Reaching the top of the stairs, Eleanor finds her sister Angela sprawled on the carpet, weeping hysterically while both of her parents hover over her like she's a fragile glass ornament. Eleanor pauses with a baffled expression, asking what on earth happened this time to warrant such a tragic theatrical performance. Vain Pop, turning around with rage in his eyes, her father screams at Eleanor, demanding to know how she can stand there so cluelessly while her precious sister is crying her eyes out. Wow, talk about instant victim blaming. Father of the year right here. He aggressively asks if she feels even a shred of pity for Angela, but Eleanor looks at him with deadpan perfection and flat out says no. Rage? The father's head practically detonates in anger, but Eleanor nonchalantly points out that Angela breaking down into tears is pretty much a daily routine at this point. Eleanor closes her eyes with peak, unbothered energy, completely immune to their emotional manipulation. Shock! Her stepmother snaps, venomously screeching Eleanor's name across the hall like a standard-issue Disney villain. Sniffling through fake tears, Angela whimpers for her parents, playing the helpless victim role to absolute perfection. Look at those crocodile tears. Give this girl an Oscar already. Angela softly gasps that it's all her own fault and begs them not to worry, prompting her stepmother to coo over what an innocent angel she is. Her father gently reassures Angela that she has done nothing wrong, completely falling for the world's most obvious sob story. Standing in the dark shadows at the top of the hall, Eleanor watches the three of them form a tight, pathetic little circle of mutual delusion. Sigh. Realizing this whole scene is a massive waste of her breath, Eleanor turns back toward the door to make a swift exit, calmly announcing that she's out of here. Boom! Before she can take 2 steps, her father roars out, asking why she always has to stand in Angela's way. Eleanor stops in her tracks, genuinely confused by the accusation. Dark, heavy pressure fills the corridor as Eleanor prepares for whatever ridiculous fanfiction story they're about to spin next. Eleanor glares back with a side eye, waiting for the delusion to drop. Rant. Spittin' mad, her father claims Angela was the one Duke Evans actually liked first, accusing Eleanor of whispering sweet lies into the Duke's ear to steal him away. He glares furiously, screaming that Angela was destined to become the Duchess and calling Eleanor a greedy monster for taking her place. Seriously, the mental gymnastics this man is pulling could win an Olympic gold medal. Eleanor tucks a strand of hair behind her ear and calmly drops a reality check, reminding him that Angela is already engaged to Lord Jules, so how on earth did she steal anyone? Drama. Clasping her hands together in dramatic sorrow, Angela steps forward and tearfully reveals that she and Jules have officially broken off their engagement. As tears pool in Angela's eyes, she announces their tragic breakup, but Eleanor just hits her with the coldest, most unbothered, and Angela continues her sob story, weeping that Jules still had feelings for Eleanor, and that she somehow discovered Duke Evans had been harboring secret feelings for her all along. A romantic flashback panel pops up, showing the Duke standing behind Angela, which is complete and utter fantasy fiction crafted straight inside Angela's delusional brain. Sob! Dropping to her knees, Angela wails that Eleanor must have slandered her to the Duke, causing him to treat her like garbage. Eleanor listens to this insane sob story and instantly connects the dots, realizing Angela fabricated this entire narrative to paint herself as a tragic victim and Eleanor as a scheming homewrecker. Standing tall over her weeping sister, Eleanor cold-heartedly shuts it down, stating that regardless of Angela's crocodile tears, her marriage with the Duke is a done deal. Gasp! Angela's head snaps up in total shock as she gasps out in horror, realizing Eleanor actually accepted the Duke's marriage proposal. Eleanor confirms it with zero hesitation, sending Angela collapsing into her mother's lap, crying about how cruel it is that Eleanor stole both of her prospective men. Eleanor internally rolls her eyes at the absolute nonsense, while her father roars that he will never allow this marriage to happen. Man, somebody give this dad a chill pill before his blood pressure explodes. Cool as ice, Eleanor informs them that the matter is already settled and that Duke Evans will be visiting the mansion next week to formally announce their wedding. Explosion! Her father's face turns beet red as he screams that she must break off the engagement immediately and force the Duke to marry Angela instead, threatening her to take back every lie she told. Eleanor takes a soft breath, letting out a tired sigh against his raging fury. Clack! Looking her father dead in the eye, Eleanor firmly declares that she will never yield a single thing to Angela ever again. The father freezes in total shock. Standing with absolute boss energy, Eleanor reminds them how she always walked on eggshells for their sake and catered to Angela's every temper tantrum, but those days are officially over. Crackle! A shockwave of pure silence hits the room as her parents stare at her in absolute disbelief, unable to process her defiance. A nostalgic flashback shows a young Eleanor hugging her parents under bright sunflowers, back when they actually treated her with affection. Eleanor remembers how they promised to cherish her and stay by her side, juxtaposed against her father now screaming at her, calling her selfish and ungrateful for forgetting their kindness. Talk about toxic parental gaslighting at its finest. He screams that getting married before Angela is completely unforgivable, while her stepmother glares at her with pure, unadulterated venom. But Eleanor's gaze remains cold and unwavering as she resolves that she will no longer cling to a fake, affectionate past that, well, no longer exists. Glow. With glowing determination in her eyes, Eleanor coldly states that she no longer needs their permission for anything in her life. Her father stammers in shock, asking if she truly intends to walk out and leave this house forever. Eleanor gives a sharp, unyielding yes, leaving her father trembling as he asks if she really understands the heavy consequences of her decision. Eleanor stands before them with absolute dignity and calm, completely unbothered by their empty threats. Dark vines spread across the panel as the heavy reality settles in. Leaving means erasing her name entirely from the Topaz family registry. Looking out at the grand estate one last time, Eleanor accepts that she'll lose her inheritance, noble title, and status, but with a fierce blue glare, she prepares to walk into her new freedom as future Duchess Evans. Ever wondered what it looks like when a villainous father tries to guilt-trip his daughter, only for it to completely backfire? As her dad furiously fumes that leaving her family for a duke will be her biggest mistake, Eleanor casually thanks him for the useless warning without flinching.
With zero hesitation in her eyes, Eleanor makes it clear that her decision is 100 set in stone and she's not turning back for anyone. Gasp! The father and stepmother stand there frozen in absolute disbelief, their jaws practically hitting the floor as they realize they've completely lost their leverage. With maximum elegance, Eleanor turns her back on the toxic household, striding toward the grand doors with total unbothered boss energy. Slam! She bids them a cold farewell as the massive doors shut behind her, leaving her stunned family drowning in their own dramatic shockwave. Honestly, watching a bad family get hit with total silence is the most satisfying thing ever. Phew! The second she's out of sight, Eleanor lets out a heavy sigh of relief, feeling a massive weight instantly lift off her shoulders. Walking down the quiet corridor toward her private quarters, every step feels lighter now that she's officially done with their endless guilt tripping. In her mind, she makes it crystal clear she has officially cut ties with this house and thrown away every bit of lingering attachment to her toxic family. Flop! Reaching her room, Eleanor straight up face plants onto her soft bed, collapsing in pure exhaustion after dropping that massive mic drop downstairs. Lying across the mattress, a genuinely serene smile spreads across her face as she tastes true peace for the first time in forever. She can't help but revel in the moment, reflecting on how completely exhilarating it feels to finally break free from her chains. Even when she remembers her dad's final bitter warnings, she just scoffs internally, because living under his thumb was a million times worse than stepping into the unknown. Approaching her doorway, Eleanor takes a gentle breath, ready to face whatever comes next with full confidence. Deep inside, she reaffirms her resolve. Goodbye, toxic stepfamily. Hello, bright, brand new future. Resting comfortably, she soaks in the total serenity of her bedroom, knowing this is officially her final night under this roof. The sheer satisfaction of shutting down a room full of manipulators is honestly top tier, and Eleanor is enjoying every single second of it. Chirp, chirp! As bright morning sunlight streams through the tall windows, Eleanor slowly blinks her eyes open, feeling the warm morning glow hit her face. Sitting up on her plush bed, she stretches and realizes she hasn't slept this deeply or peacefully in ages. Knock, knock. Suddenly, a polite tap echoes against her heavy bedroom door, breaking the peaceful morning silence. 3 maids step into the lavish chamber, bowing respectfully as they enter to address their former mistress. Eleanor curiously asks what brings them here so early, only for the maid to reveal that her father gave strict orders to clear out all of Eleanor's belongings immediately. Smirk! Eleanor side-eyes the situation, immediately realizing her dad is trying to kick her out in a hurry, foolishly thinking she'll panic and beg for his forgiveness. Shaking her head at their petty attempt, Eleanor calmly instructs the maids to leave all the heavy furniture behind and only pack up her wardrobe. The maids exchange bewildered glances, completely taken aback by how unfazed Eleanor is by this sudden eviction order. Eleanor inwardly chuckles at the irony. Sure, this move is happening a bit faster than she originally planned, but it actually plays right into her hands. Thanks to her father's petty rush job, she can skip all the awkward waiting and head straight to Duke Evans' estate today. With a gorgeous, triumphant smile, Eleanor tells the maids to pass along her heartfelt thanks to her father for speeding up her departure. Talk about turning a punishment into a total win. That's ultimate queen behavior. The maids stand there sweat-dropping in utter confusion, completely speechless at her unbothered reaction. Shock! Down in the courtyard, Eleanor climbs into her waiting carriage, while up on the balcony, Angela watches from the window in a total panic, screaming for her father. Rushing into the drawing room, Angela frantically confronts her dad, demanding to know how he could just let Eleanor walk out like this. Sipping his drink with cold indifference, her father tells Angela to calm down, arrogantly claiming that without their family's noble backing, the Duke's family would never actually allow Eleanor to marry him. Angela bites her lip nervously, secretly doubting her dad's logic as she remembers how Duke Evans looked at Eleanor with genuine interest. Panic! Her stepmother chimed in with deep concern, pointing out that if Eleanor cuts ties, they lose their connection to the Duke entirely, which would ruin their social standing. Glow. Dark, sinister energy swirls around Angela as her eyes glow a villainous green. She realizes she has to take matters into her own hands to ruin this wedding at all costs. Clasping her hands over her chest with a fake innocent look surrounded by dark roses, Angela sinisterly whispers that she has a devious little scheme up her sleeve. Wow, this girl really can't go 5 minutes without plotting revenge, can she?
Meanwhile, bathed in a warm golden sunset, Eleanor steps down from her carriage right outside the Duke's grand estate, welcomed by the head butler. Butler bows politely, revealing that Duke Evans already informed him of the situation, while Eleanor remembers sending a letter right after yesterday's confrontation to see if he'd take her in early. Looking around the empty driveway, the butler curiously inquires where the rest of her personal belongings and luggage might be. Zoom in! The camera pans down to reveal just 3 tiny, modest suitcases sitting on the cobblestone path. Sweat? The butler's jaw drops in shock, asking if that's seriously all she brought. But Eleanor just innocently asks if there's a problem, forcing him to quickly put on a professional smile and guide her inside. Shine! Sunlight bounces off the elegant crystal vases and gold-trimmed decor inside the Duke's breathtaking mansion. Up on the grand second-floor lounge, Duke Evans stands by the window while Eleanor relaxes on a velvet sofa, softly apologizing for showing up ahead of schedule. Looking ethereal in her white off-shoulder dress, Eleanor listens as the Duke smoothly assures her that everything was already prepared to welcome her with open arms. Crossing his arms with a dashing posture, the Duke glances over at her with a curious glint in his crimson eyes. Eleanor explains that her family explicitly banned her from marrying him as long as Angela was around, so leaving early was her only move. Smirk? Resting his chin on his fingers, the Duke lets out a playful smirk, teasingly asking if marrying him was truly more important to her than her own family ties? Well, Eleanor's chibi form pops up as she sweat drops, bluntly admitting that she honestly just wanted to escape her toxic family. The Duke bursts out laughing, teasing her that her goal is already 100% achieved. Returning to her serious tone, Eleanor drops a heavy piece of wisdom, reminding him that true freedom only exists when your basic survival and security are fully guaranteed. She looks at him with deadpan honesty, stating that marrying him guarantees she won't end up starving on the streets. Duke Evans chuckles warmly at her blunt practicality, thinking to himself that out of all the women who ever pursued him for power or money, Eleanor is the very first one to marry him just for a comfortable life. Imagine walking out on your toxic family with zero backup, only to end up alone in a grand mansion with an insanely handsome Duke bathed in dramatic golden light. Eleanor nervously tests the waters, asking if losing her noble family support ruins everything. But the Duke just smirks and hits her with the smoothest line ever, saying he doesn't have parents to meddle in his wife's business anyway. Tap, tap. With slow, deliberate footsteps, he closes the distance between them, radiating pure main character energy that instantly shifts the room's atmosphere. Leaning in close, he softly touches her chin, asking if she remembers the one strict rule about his future bride, that the only woman he can ever marry is standing right in front of him. Shine. Surrounded by glowing red roses, he reminds her that she's the chosen one because she holds the holy ruby. Honestly, if a dark romance lead looked at me like that, I'd forget my own name too. Stepping back to keep things professional, he gives her full freedom to explore the estate until dinner while he finishes his work, and Eleanor instantly requests a trip to the library. Without missing a beat, the Duke calls over his head butler, William, ordering him to escort his future Duchess straight to the archives like a total gentleman. Gasp! The second Eleanor hears about the massive library, her eyes light up like a kid in a candy store as she imagines all the secret records waiting inside. Wandering down the grand aisles lined with ancient wooden bookshelves, Eleanor immediately gets to work hunting for specific hidden knowledge. Snap! Pulling a massive leather-bound tome off the shelf, her eyes widen as she locks onto the exact title she was searching for, the Volkalak Legend Notebook. This ancient encyclopedia holds secrets about rare creatures, extinct beasts, and most importantly, detailed breakdowns of vampire ecology. You gotta respect Eleanor's grind. She's out here doing thorough background checks on her fiancé before signing the marriage papers. Clasping the heavy book against her chest, Eleanor's gaze turns dead serious as she prepares to uncover every secret about the man she's about to marry. Flipping through the yellowed pages, she confirms the classic vampire lore, weakness to sunlight, a strict diet of raw meat and fine wine, and supreme night vision. Huh? Just as she's about to close the book, something completely unexpected catches her sharp eye between the thick pages. Reaching inside, Eleanor carefully pulls out a mysterious old photograph tucked hidden deep within the book's binding. Zoom in! The faded picture shows a stern nobleman with short blonde hair who Eleanor immediately recognizes as the previous Duke, the current Duke's father. Connecting the dots in her head, Eleanor realizes the old Duke must have known full well that his son was carrying a vampire lineage. but as she holds the delicate paper up to the light, her eyes widen in total disbelief at what's right next to him. Standing right beside the old Duke in a gorgeous bridal gown is a blonde woman who looks uncannily identical to Eleanor herself. Talk about a plot twist that completely rewrites the family lore. Gasp! Eleanor instinctively clutches her glowing holy ruby necklace, her heart hammering against her ribs as wild questions rush through her mind. Gazing back down at the vintage wedding photo, the uncanny resemblance is so striking, it gives her genuine chills. Standing frozen in the dim library aisle, Eleanor tries to wrap her head around how a random historical document features her exact doppelganger. Shock. Her eyes flash in intense realization as she wonders if her connection to this vampire bloodline goes way deeper than a simple contract. Staring into the eyes of the mysterious blonde bride in the photo, Eleanor feels an unsettling aura connecting their fates across generations. Squeezing her pendant tight, Eleanor's breathing turns shallow as she questions whether her stepfamily's adoption of her was actually part of a massive setup all along. She internally panics, wondering why a face she's never seen in her life feels so painfully familiar and deeply rooted in her soul. Startle! A sudden voice shatters her intense train of thought, making her jump right out of her skin. Standing by the grand double doors, William politely bows and announces that her presence is requested in the dining hall because dinner is served. Swift, reacting on pure instinct, Eleanor quickly slips the mysterious photograph back into the heavy tome to hide her secret discovery. Keeping her composure like a true pro, she gathers her skirts and heads straight down the hallway, leaving the library behind as the plot thickens even further. Joining the Duke in the breathtaking gold-accented dining room, Eleanor takes her seat across a grand banquet table laid out with a lavish feast. Slicing into his meal, the Duke calmly explains their next steps. They'll set their wedding date tomorrow at Horatian Temple, keeping the ceremony low-key so nobody discovers it's a contract marriage. Eleanor gives a sharp nod, keeping her cool while mentally tracking every move in this high-stakes game. Taking a bite of her juicy steak, Eleanor thinks to herself how smoothly everything is going, but she knows her toxic stepfamily definitely won't sit idly by and let her succeed. Nom! She quietly enjoys her delicious dinner, reminding herself that surviving this household requires staying 10 steps ahead of Angela at all times. The Duke suddenly sets down his utensils and glares at her across the table, asking point-blank what research she was conducting in his private library. Sweat? Eleanor stiffens up, nervously stammering that she was just doing a little light reading and general research. Flustered by his sharp gaze, she awkwardly side-eyes William standing in the corner, worrying that bringing up vampires right now will expose her knowledge to the staff. Sensing her hesitation, the Duke casually waves his hand and reveals that William knows every single secret about his true identity, so she can speak completely freely. Sparkle! William flashes a ridiculously sweet, wholesome smile surrounded by flowers, making Eleanor let out a massive sigh of relief. Butler of the Year award goes to William, hands down. The Duke leans back, admitting that living under the same roof as a literal monster would make anyone anxious, telling her she can ask William any burning questions to ease her mind. Eleanor immediately sits up straight and cuts him off, clarifying that fear isn't the reason she went searching for answers. Looking him dead in the eyes with absolute sincerity, she asks why he's so surprised. Isn't it completely natural to want to learn everything about the man who's about to become her husband? Stunned, the Duke's eyes widen as her blunt honesty catches him completely off guard, rendering him momentarily speechless. Dabbing his lips with a white silk napkin, he composes himself and quietly mutters that he understands her point. Clearing his throat, the Duke stands up from the table, announcing that dinner is officially over and stating that it's time for them to move to the bedroom. Gasp! Eleanor's jaw drops as her face flushes red, but the Duke just smirks, reminding her that he fulfilled his part of the contract by offering protection, and now it's time for her to pay up. Creak! The heavy ornate doors swing open as dark, romantic lighting pours out into the hallway, setting a super tense and mysterious vibe. Step! Eleanor slowly crosses the threshold into his private chambers, her heart pounding as the Duke turns back and asks if she's truly prepared. Looking up into his glowing crimson eyes, Eleanor grips her dress and softly confirms that she's ready to uphold her end of the deal. Man, talk about an absolute cliffhanger to end on. Just when Eleanor thinks she's about to seal a simple business transaction, the Duke casually starts pulling off his shirt right in his private bedroom. Eleanor's eyes go wide as she stammers out, asking why on earth he's stripping down in front of her. Without even flinching, the Duke glances over his bare shoulder with those glowing crimson eyes, coolly dropping the fact that he just really hates getting bloodstains on his expensive clothes. And let's be honest, the artist clearly spent half the chapter's budget rendering these six-pack abs. You can practically hear the dramatic anime shoujo sparkles radiating off his chest. Eleanor tries her absolute hardest not to stare, her face turning bright red as she stutters out that there's no problem, even though her brain is clearly short-circuiting. Squeezing her eyes shut, she takes a deep breath and desperately tries to convince herself that for a vampire, drinking blood is literally just grabbing a quick meal, so there's zero reason to overthink this. The Duke steps right into her personal space, gently resting his hand on her bare shoulder while reassuring her that even after he feeds, she won't die or transform into a creature of the night. Eleanor looks up into his eyes, admitting that while she logically gets it, every single time he feeds on her, her body goes through a super weird, unexplainable reaction. She admits that her temperature spikes and a strange ticking sensation spreads deep inside her stomach, making her feel like something completely unusual is happening to her body. A sudden light bulb goes off in the Duke's head, and a playful smirk creeps onto his face as he reveals that vampires can trigger two totally different effects when drinking blood. One is killing their prey, and the second effect is triggering pure, intense pleasure, so her wild bodily reaction is completely normal. Talk about a massive lore drop that leaves Eleanor totally speechless. Eleanor stands frozen in place as that word pleasure echoes in her head, her mind completely scrambling to process what he just casually dropped on her. Flashbacks of his previous bite rush through her mind, and she finally connects the dots as to why her body reacted so intensely whenever he held her close. Leaning in until their breaths align, the Duke wraps his arm around her waist and asks if she has any other pressing questions. But Eleanor is so flustered she can barely squeak out a no. Her heart starts pounding against her ribs like a drumbeat, and she internally panics because her body's heating up just from him standing near her, before he's even taken a single drop of blood. The Duke lowers his head near her collarbone, whispering with a dangerously smooth grin that her blood tastes astonishingly sweet before pressing his lips softly against her skin. He slow burns the moment, softly kissing and teasing along her neck and shoulder, sending total shivers down Eleanor's spine as the room's atmosphere turns ridiculously intense. Feeling his lips trail down her neck, Eleanor gasps out, flusteredly asking if he's actually going to bite her or just keep teasing her like this. The Duke gives her a wicked smirk, whispering right into her ear that blood always tastes 10 times better when he takes his sweet time teasing his bride first. Crunch! He sinks his fangs straight into her neck, and Eleanor gasps as that overwhelming rush of sensation instantly washes over her entire body. Overwhelmed by the feeling, Eleanor's eyes gloss over as she clutches herself, weakly whispering internally that she absolutely hates how powerless this makes her feel. Sensing her genuine distress, the Duke's smirk instantly fades, his crimson eyes softening as he pauses his feeding to check on her. Shifting her gently onto the bed, he hovers over her and reminds her that since they're about to be husband and wife, she needs to stop using such formal, distant titles with him. Gazing up into his glowing red eyes with an intense, vulnerable expression, Eleanor softly test runs his actual name, calling him Lord Clive. Hearing his name on her lips brings a genuinely warm, affectionate smile to Clive's face, as he softly agrees that he likes the sound of that. With a quiet gasp from Eleanor, Clive sinks his fangs back in to complete his feeding, leaving the room dripping in high-stakes romance tension. Cut to the next morning. Sunlight pours into the grand bedroom as Clive sits up completely refreshed, flashing a smug smile while asking Eleanor if she's already forgotten last night's action. Eleanor frantically pulls her dress top back up over her chest, blushing furiously while giving him the ultimate side-eye of embarrassment. Panicking internally, Eleanor wonders if every single feeding session is going to be this intense, but Clive casually pulls his shirt on and reminds her they need to hurry to the temple. Trying to regain her usual stoic composure, Eleanor stammers out an agreement, straightening her gown so they can go finalize their official marriage contract. She carefully adjusts her delicate shoulder straps and grips her glowing holy ruby pendant, mentally preparing for whatever high society drama awaits them. Clive gives her a quick sideways glance, clearly amused by how flustered his future Duchess gets over his simple comments. Fast forward to the Grand Harrison Temple. Both of them are dressed to the nines, stepping into the massive sunlit marble hall like an absolute power couple. Clive looks at her fully buttoned-up high-neck dress and teasingly asks if she isn't suffocating in such tight clothes, to which Eleanor huffs back that it's entirely his fault. Turning her head away with the most adorable pout, Eleanor pretends to ignore him, though her cheeks are still slightly flushed. Honestly, these chibi comedy cutaways are top tier. Seeing the high and mighty vampire duke smugly laughing while chibi Eleanor glares at him with pure murder in her eyes never gets old. Interrupting their playful bickering, heavy footsteps echo through the hall as an elderly priest approaches them, bowing politely to apologize for the delay. Holding official church documents in his hands, the priest looks deeply troubled, solemnly mentioning that he ran a routine background check on both of their marital histories. Bam! Out of nowhere, the priest drops an absolute bombshell, flat out declaring that he cannot approve their marriage. Clive's red eyes instantly narrow in sharp shock. Wait, the drama just hit an absolute brick wall. The priest steps closer with a somber expression, reviewing the official records. Redeclaring his rejection, the priest stands firm, leaving both Eleanor and Clive completely stunned in the middle of the holy temple. Eleanor steps forward in total disbelief, pointing out that since neither of them has ever been married before, there shouldn't be a single valid legal reason to deny them. Her mind immediately races into overdrive, wondering if her toxic family somehow filed a missing persons report or tried to track her down after she ran away. The priest drops the cold, hard truth, stating that by kingdom law, less than a full year has passed since Lady Eleanor's engagement was officially broken off. An official graphic breakdown reveals the kingdom's strict marital code, designed to prevent hasty noble marriages by enforcing a mandatory 1-year waiting period after any broken engagement. However, high society nobles usually bypass this outdated rule by simply not reporting broken engagements to the temple immediately, making the law practically forgotten by everyone. Clutching her holy ruby necklace as realization strikes like lightning, Eleanor realizes this mandatory waiting period wasn't an accident, it was a calculated move by her evil stepsister Angela. Her eyes darken with intense rage as she confirms to Clive that Angela deliberately reported her broken engagement to the temple just to ruin her chances of marrying the Duke. Clive stares down at her with a deadly serious gaze, his sharp mind already calculating how to tear through this petty political trap. Walking arm in arm back down the grand temple steps lined with vibrant yellow flowers, the couple maintains their calm, regal posture despite the sudden setback. With an unexpected political hurdle standing in their way, Clive and Eleanor step out into the sunlight, ready to wage total war against her toxic family to secure their marriage. Hook start, Clive literally looks at the grand temple hall surrounded by white roses and casually ponders if they should just launch a full-scale assault and force their way through. Talk about an absolute unhinged strategy right after getting denied at the altar. Eleanor almost loses her mind on the spot, frantically begging him not to drop domestic terrorism plans right outside the temple gates, before sighing that since it's the law, they've got no choice but to give up for now. Flashbacks of her evil stepsister Angela's smug face haunt Eleanor's mind, making her curse her own impulsiveness for running away without a solid plan, while softly apologizing to Clive for dragging him into her family mess. But Clive isn't about to let some petty political trap stop him. He smoothly suggests they go public with their relationship right away, completely locking her toxic sister out from pulling any more crazy moves. Honestly, watching a brooding vampire duke flex his social power with zero hesitation is pure top-tier drama. Even as sunlight bathes the temple courtyard, Eleanor lowers her head in total defeat, feeling a heavy weight in her chest as she worries that she's doing nothing but dragging him down. Noticing her drooping head, Clive's eyes narrow slightly before he suddenly reaches out, grabbing the fabric of her gown with a sharp tug to pull her right out of her self-pity loop. Leaning down with those glowing crimson eyes, Clive drops a dangerously possessive line, reassuring her that he's never gonna let her go. So even if she ever wants to leave, she's stuck with him for life. Eleanor's jaw drops with a soft gasp as her brain completely short-circuits, totally caught off guard by his intense, borderline unhinged declaration of commitment. Turning on his heel, Clive casually strolls down the marble staircase, telling her it's time to head home because her exhausted mind desperately needs rest. Okay, but can we appreciate how this guy switches from terrifying possessive duke to attentive housewife in literally 2 seconds flat? Watching his retreating back as bright yellow lilies bloom along the path, Eleanor stands completely frozen, whispering a quiet "why" into the air. Gently clutching her chest as a soft breeze rustles her gown, she feels all her suffocating anxiety melt away in an instant, completely washed away by the warmth of his words. Flashback memories of his midnight feeding session flood her mind, and she realizes with a deep blush that even back then, when his fangs sank into her skin, she didn't hate it at all. In fact, her body secretly craved more of his touch. Overwhelmed by the intense sensation, she clutches her head in utter confusion, desperately questioning why her body is reacting so wildly to a terrifying predator. Framed by a soft aura of pink roses, her eyes fill with total clarity as she finally admits to herself the ultimate truth. She doesn't just want protection, she genuinely wants to stay by his side forever. Man, talk about falling head over heels for the vampire who treats you like a five-star buffet. Up ahead, Clive continues walking silently down the grand garden path, his sharp silhouette standing tall against the bright blue sky. Swoosh! The romantic tension in the air is practically radiating off the screen, filled with glowing sparkles and delicate floating flower petals. As they walk side by side, Eleanor steals a quiet, sideways glance at his razor-sharp profile, her heart pounding louder with every single step. Unable to resist the sudden impulse, her hand slowly reaches out toward his dark coat, her fingers trembling as she internally screams at herself that she just wants to feel his touch one more time. She stares intensely at his broad back, her heart racing as she inches closer and closer, practically on the verge of making a bold move. Snap! The second Clive senses something and turns back, asking if something's wrong, Eleanor instantly pulls her hand back with total panic, squeaking out that everything is totally fine. Squeezing her eyes shut with cheeks burning redder than a ripe tomato, Eleanor internally panics, knowing that if she keeps acting this needy, she's completely gonna embarrass herself. Clive pauses in his tracks, tilting his head with a cool, inquisitive look as he softly calls out her name, wondering why she's acting so bizarre. Trying to regain her composure, Eleanor blurted out that, after doing some deep thinking, she wants to sleep in her own separate bedroom from now on. Clive's cool expression instantly crumples into an annoyed pout, dropping a sharp "why" that proves he was definitely planning on sharing a bed tonight. Flustered beyond belief, Eleanor stammers out the world's most obvious excuse, claiming she suffers from severe insomnia whenever anyone else sleeps beside her. Clive crosses his arms with an unamused look, deadpanning a reality check about how on earth he expects him to handle his intense blood cravings if she's locked away in another wing. Stab! Eleanor's heart takes a total hit as reality slaps her in the face, reminding herself that he only touches her for sweet blood. So she plasters on a fake smile and politely asks if he can't just drink from some other random noblewoman instead. She rationalizes it internally, telling herself that since they aren't officially married yet, watching him feed on someone else wouldn't be a big deal at all. Right? Grab. Before she can finish that thought, Clive snaps, reaching out and grabbing her chin with the cold, terrifying grip that instantly cuts off her breath. The sheer rage in his crimson eyes is honestly terrifying. Like, bro went from 0 to 100 real quick just because she suggested he cheat on her. Towering over her with a dangerous scowl, Clive makes it crystal clear that he isn't some mindless beast. He only wants her blood and has absolute zero interest in any other woman on the planet. Releasing her face with a harsh flick of his wrist, he orders her to burn that fact into her brain before turning away, leaving Eleanor standing in shock as she desperately calls out for him to wait. But as the couple walks away in tense silence, the bushes behind them rustle softly, revealing Eleanor's evil stepsister Angela lurking in the shadows with a sinister, insidious smirk. Angela's green eyes widen with pure malicious delight as she processes the secret she just overheard, realizing that the mighty Duke Evans is actually a blood-drinking monster. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Eleanor buries herself in the mansion's vast library, flipping through ancient, dusty tombstones that reveal a massive lore drop about pure-blooded vampires versus ordinary turners. The ancient text reveals that anyone bitten by a pureblood turns into a lower vampire, and once they hit their 20s, they inevitably mutate into horrific, mindless beasts. Look at those creepy monster sketches on the page. The artist really went full dark fantasy mode for 2 panels. A stark white box drops another gruesome truth, stating that the only way for these creatures to suppress their beastly urge is by consuming fresh human blood regularly. Staring down at the pages with deep blue eyes, Eleanor digests the terrifying information, her mind racing with endless questions. Flashback images of Clive's brooding face haunt her as she sits in her plush armchair, questioning why, if any human blood can stop him from turning into a monster, he is so obsessed with taking only hers. Flip, she turns to the next chapter where golden light illuminates an illustration of a holy saintess, revealing that a vampire can actually be turned completely back into a human through blood purification and holy prayers. Eleanor's eyes light up with sudden hope, realizing that if they can track down a true saintess, Clive could be saved from his vampire curse entirely. The book displays a detailed portrait of the holy woman shrouded in a pristine white veil and intricate ceremonial robes. But just as hope sparks, a heavy text box crushes her dreams, revealing that as soon as the ancient vampire war ended, the legendary saintess vanished from the temple without a trace. While Eleanor wonders what became of the saintess, the scene shifts to Clive's dimly lit study, where his loyal butler reports that back in her family home, Eleanor was severely mistreated, not just by her stepfamily, but even by the household servants. The butler explains with a somber tone how blatant the favoritism was toward Angela, proving that poor Eleanor has been living through pure emotional hell her entire life. Clive listens in grim silence, his red eyes narrowing with quiet fury. Resting his chin on his hand, Clive finally connects the dots, realizing that Eleanor's constant anxiety and lack of self-worth stemmed directly from years of abuse at the hands of those topaz scumbags. Seriously, someone give Clive green light to go erase that entire family already. Sighing softly, Clive pivots the conversation, asking if the butler completed his investigation on the saintess. The butler confirms that Lady Sophia married shortly after retiring from holy duties. A romantic memory illustration fades into sadness as the butler reveals that Lady Sophia unfortunately passed away from a sudden illness without ever giving birth to any children. Clive's sharp mind immediately pivots, questioning if there's any chance a holy child was secretly left in an orphanage. The butler pulls out a file, revealing that Eleanor herself was an abandoned baby left in a basket on an orphanage doorstep with unknown origins and a glowing jewel necklace. Clive's red eyes light up as he theorizes that Eleanor might literally carry the sacred bloodline of the saintess. However, the butler dumps cold water on that theory, pointing out the massive distance between the places, adding that the only living connection to Lady Sophia is her former husband, Lord Ryan. Clive gazes out the window, weighing the possibilities in his mind, realizing that while the timeline fits, a holy saintess would never abandon her own flesh and blood without a desperate reason. The ultimate mystery of Eleanor's true origin continues to deepen. Brooding in his dimly lit study, Duke Clive stares into the distance, wondering if his father's old research really holds the secret to his curse, or if it's just another dead end. He turns to his butler with a sharp glare, demanding to know if there are any other hidden clues left behind besides that mysterious final will. The butler sighs, explaining that despite searching every corner of the late Duke's private room, he found 0 extra documents, proving the old man went to extreme lengths to bury his deepest secrets. Rereading the document in his hands, Clive realizes that even if this legendary saintess blood can't turn him back into a full human, its purifying power is undeniably real. Remembering his father's lifelong obsession with finding a cure, Clive knows there must be a deeper purpose hidden inside that will, and he's determined to unlock it. Meanwhile, back across town, heavy footsteps echo through the halls as a storm of pure envy prepares to unleash. Just look at Angela fuming in her room. Her blood is practically boiling after watching the Duke treat her sister like royalty while completely ignoring her. She stomps her foot in utter frustration, internally screaming about why on earth nobody in her family takes her warning seriously. Running straight to her father, Angela hysterically blurts out that Duke Evans is actually a bloodthirsty monster, claiming that's the only reason he picked Eleanor. But her dad just sighs in complete disbelief. Her father dryly reminds her that vampires were wiped out ages ago, but Angela aggressively insists she overheard them talking about drinking human blood with her very own ears. Instead of panicking, her dad deadpans a hilarious reality check, pointing out that if the Duke really is a bloodsucker, isn't it a massive relief that Eleanor took the hit so Angela didn't have to marry a creature of the night? Honestly, this dad's selective parenting is next-level savage. Patting her head with blatant favoritism, he promises to arrange an even better marriage with a wealthy nobleman, brushing off the Duke's rejection as a mere mistake in judgment. Left alone, Angela's eyes darken as she fumes over how every single servant and family member laughed off her warnings, even though she knows 100% what she heard. Staring into the dark hallway, a sinister question takes root in her mind, wondering why timid little Eleanor would willingly walk into a monster's lair without shedding a single tear.
Her paranoid brain instantly jumps to the absolute wildest conclusion, convincing herself that Eleanor made a deal with the devil to execute a grand revenge scheme against her family. Talk about main character delusion at its finest. Clenching her jaw with pure hatred, Angela vows that she will never let her sister get away with pulling such a villainous power move. Pacing back and forth past an ornate vase of red roses, a twisted scheme suddenly clicks in her head as she decides to take matters into her own hands. With an insidious smirk spreading across her face, Angela prepares to strike. While back at the Duke's grand estate, Eleanor lets out a soft, sleepy yawn as she stretches in bed. Rubbing her stiff neck after spending hours buried in ancient library scrolls, Eleanor slowly shakes off the exhaustion from her late-night research spree. A gentle knock echoes at her bedroom door, and Eleanor warmly calls out for them to step inside. The head maid walks in with a warm, respectful smile that instantly makes the room feel cozy and inviting. The maid politely announces that she's here to help prepare a luxurious hot bath, catching Eleanor completely off guard since she's never experienced such royal treatment before. Stepping into the bathhouse, Eleanor is greeted by an absolute indoor paradise, complete with a cascading waterfall and fragrant red rose petals floating atop crystal-clear water. As the maid gently washes her long golden hair in the steaming bath, Eleanor soaks in the warm water, feeling all her built-up tension melt away. Floating in total bliss, she marvels at how incredible it feels, admitting to herself that back at her abusive home, she was never allowed to enjoy such simple luxuries. Can we take a second to appreciate how the artist drew this lighting? The water reflections look stunning. Smiling softly, the maid mentions that the soothing, aromatic essential oils in the bath were personally selected by Duke Clive himself. Eleanor turns into a tiny chibi blob of shock, floating in the water as her brain tries to process the brooding Duke doing something so amazingly thoughtful. The maid gently combs through her wet locks, confirming that Clive specifically set everything up because he noticed how worn out she looked after their intense confrontation. Eleanor's heart flutters as a soft blush creeps onto her cheeks, completely touched by his quiet, attentive care. Sitting gracefully in the bath while the maid carefully tends to her, Eleanor feels a deep sense of peace for the very first time in her life. Looking down at her soft hands beneath the shimmering water, she reflects on how drastically her world is transformed since leaving her toxic home behind. Suddenly remembering her loyal little maid companion, a warm thought crosses her mind during the quiet moment. Eleanor asks about young Jane's progress, and the head maid happily reports that the girl is an absolute natural, learning household duties faster than anyone expected. Relief washes over Eleanor as she expresses her genuine gratitude to the staff for warmly welcoming both her and Jane, without a shred of prejudice. The head maid shakes her head with a tender smile, reassuring Eleanor that every single servant in the Duke's estate was eagerly counting down the days for her arrival. Eleanor's blue eyes widen in utter disbelief as the words sink in, leaving her completely stunned. Leaning in warmly, the maid explains that because Duke Clive chose her, they already knew she would be special, reminding her that she isn't an outsider at all, but the future duchess of the entire house. Overwhelmed by the incredible kindness of people who treat her like true royalty, Eleanor blushes furiously and squeaks out a heartfelt thank you. Stepping out of the bath, the maid shows her a rack lined with gorgeous white dresses, asking what colors Eleanor prefers so they can tailor a whole new custom wardrobe just for her. Asked such a simple question, Eleanor freezes in place, her mind drifting back into a bitter, painful memory from her past. As delicate floral petals fade into dark shadows, the narrative shifts back 9 long years to when she was just a young girl living under her stepmother's thumb. 9 years ago, little Angela and Eleanor were sitting together on a velvet sofa, flipping through a boutique catalog packed with extravagant gowns. Knowing that while Angela could order dozens of dresses, Eleanor was only allowed to pick one single outfit, she carefully scanned every page to find the most perfect design. Spotting a breathtaking dress with elegant ribbon details, young Eleanor's eyes sparkled with joy as the dressmaker praised her incredible taste. The dressmaker assured her that the gown would look absolutely divine on her, causing little Angela to immediately swell up with intense jealousy right beside her. Seeing that the dress was surprisingly affordable, Eleanor silently prayed in her heart that her stepmother would approve the modest purchase. But before Eleanor could speak, greedy little Angela pointed at the exact same gown, demanding it for herself. When the shopkeeper mentioned it was an adult size that wouldn't fit her, Angela didn't care at all.
Flashing a spoiled smile, Angela turned to her mother, claiming she would just save the dress in her closet until she grew up. Talk about toxic sibling entitlement entirely at its peak. When the polite dressmaker suggested making a second dress so both girls could have one, the stepmother snapped with pure venom, screaming that Eleanor had no right to match her precious daughter and ordering the gown exclusively for Angela. Throwing a stack of cheap, ugly dress designs into little Eleanor's lap, the stepmother berated her for daring to desire anything her spoiled stepsister wanted, leaving poor Eleanor heartbroken in the dust. Imagine growing up constantly told you're too plain to ever wear anything nice. Flashback to 9 years ago, and Eleanor's awful stepmother is practically oozing toxicity, sneering that a gorgeous dress would look terrible on her plain face and forcing her into drab clothes. Back in the present, those years of emotional abuse still run deep, as Eleanor meekly asks the head maid for the simplest, cheapest dress possible while soaking in the steaming bath. The head maid looks at her with genuine pity, gently pointing out that a vibrant, stunning gown would make her look like absolute royalty. Softly smiling beneath the floating rose petals, Eleanor whispers a sweet thank you, but her self-doubt isn't that easily washed away. She awkwardly explains that she doesn't want to waste the Duke's fortune or embarrass him by wearing flashy clothes, leaving the head maid completely speechless at her overwhelming modesty. Seriously, somebody give this girl a hug and a massive shopping spree already. With a gentle splash, Eleanor steps out of the soothing water, droplets glistening on her fair skin as she wraps herself up. Staring into space with her long blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, she looks like an absolute goddess, completely unaware of how stunning she truly is. Deep down, her heart aches with anxiety, convincing herself that she's already a burden, and the absolute least she can do is not look embarrassing standing next to a magnificent duke. Talk about top-tier imposter syndrome. Creak! Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of the bathhouse swings wide open without a single warning knock. And guess who nonchalantly strolls right into the room? None other than Duke Clive himself, stepping in while she's practically unclothed. Gasp! The room temperature instantly skyrockets as time completely freezes for both of them. Eleanor squeaks in utter horror, slamming her arms across her chest in a desperate frenzy while screaming at him to give a little notice before barging into a ladies' room. But Clive just stands there looking cool as a cucumber, deadpanning that he just finished a sweaty workout and figured they could share the space. Bro, read the room. You can't just crash her private bath like it's a public pool. Staring down at her with a completely poker face, he begins casually loosening his collar while Eleanor turns into a bright red tomato from pure humiliation. Shove. Using every ounce of her strength, Eleanor frantically shoves him right out the door, yelling at the top of her lungs that she's changing and he needs to get out immediately. Leaning against the closed door with her heart hammering in her chest, Eleanor fumes over how insanely insensitive and shameless this brooding vampire lord can be. Tug. Out in the hallway, Clive casually adjusts his silk tie, looking completely unbothered on the outside, but secretly processing what just happened. Eleanor's shy, humble words about not wanting to waste his family's money or humiliate him keep echoing over and over in his mind. Dark eyes narrowing, Clive mutters to himself in total disbelief, wondering if she's seriously holding back over a simple wardrobe and asking himself if she actually thinks his family is too broke to afford her. A chaotic light bulb turns on inside his head as he decides that the only logical solution is to buy out every single dress and luxury accessory in the entire empire for her. He smirked, convincing himself that throwing an absolute mountain of high fashion at her feet is the best way to teach her just how wealthy her future family really is. Okay, talk about the ultimate flex. Why can't every husband solve problems like this? Tap! His polished shoes come to a sharp halt on the plush carpet as another subtle detail hits him. Recalling how she casually mentioned that her absolute favorite color is violet, Clive strokes his chin, silently taking mental notes for his grand shopping spree. Later that afternoon, Eleanor steps into the grand corridor wearing a simple yet lovely blue dress, guided by the polite head butler, William. Escorting her through the sunlit halls, William warmly leads her toward the estate's sprawling upper balcony. Throwing open the French doors, he reveals a breathtaking view of the manicured courtyard, mentioning that the former Duke and Duchess used to sit here every single morning for breakfast. Hearing mention of Clive's late parents, Eleanor's blue eyes flicker with deep curiosity and quiet reflection. Turning to the butler, Eleanor gently asks what kind of people Clive's mother and father were, eager to understand the mysteries surrounding his family history. Her voice carries a gentle warmth, genuinely wanting to learn about the people who shaped the man she's coming to care for. William pauses, resting his gloved hand on his chin as he carefully retrieves his oldest memories of the ducal couple. He softly explains that the late Duchess was brilliant and radiant, while the late Duke was a brave, generous leader. And though their marriage started as a cold political match, something magical happened. A beautiful vision of the young couple appears, showing them wrapped in a loving embrace, proving to everyone around them that they had fallen head over heels in love. But the mood instantly drops as Eleanor quietly brings up the tragic rumor, asking if it's true that the Duchess became pregnant with a vampire's child and took her own life. William somberly nods, confirming the dark secret. Eleanor's heart breaks for them, wondering how a couple so deeply in love could meet such a terrifying and heart-wrenching fate. William reveals that despite the tragedy, the late Duke loved little Clive with every fiber of his soul, raising him like his true son and dedicating his entire life to searching for a cure. A touching image of the young father holding baby Clive highlights the deep bond they shared, moving Eleanor to tears as she realizes how much suffering the late Duke endured. This backstory is hanging right in the feels. Wanting to ensure Clive's safety, Eleanor whispers a question about who else knows about his vampire blood. William reveals that besides his father, only an elusive apothecary named Malaya knows the truth. Eleanor tilts her head, searching her memory banks, but realizes she's never once heard of a master apothecary going by that name. A shadow of suspicion flickers across her face, feeling like another piece of this massive puzzle is about to fall into place. Smiling reassuringly, William explains that Lady Malaya lives in total seclusion away from public eyes, but promises that Eleanor will likely cross paths with her soon enough. Noticing the golden sunset painting the sky, William smoothly transitions, letting her know that Clive is away for the evening and dinner will be delivered straight to her room. Surprised by his sudden absence, Eleanor asks where the Duke went, only for William to reveal he was summoned to an exclusive royal banquet with the Queen Dowager. Eleanor's eyes widen in absolute shock at the mention of the high-stakes royal court. Clink! Far across the capital in a lavish palace hall, crystal wine glasses toast together under glittering chandeliers. The grand banquet table is piled high with extravagant feasts, surrounded by powerful aristocrats and elite nobles laughing in luxury. Sycophantic laughter echoes through the hall as an arrogant noble shamelessly flatters the Queen Dowager, claiming her beauty is so bright it practically blinds everyone in the room. A slick, silver-haired noble with sinister purple eyes and sharp fangs lets out a sly grin, clearly up to no good in this snake pit of politics. He boasts loudly that the rich red wine being poured was harvested directly from the royal winery Her Majesty invested in. Savoring a deep sip, he dramatically praises its irresistible flavor, encouraging the entire room to indulge without restraint. As the silver-haired lord raises his glass to toast the crowd, Duke Clive sits at the far end of the table in dead silence, completely unbothered by the noise, while the tense political chess match officially begins. Ever wonder what it's like to sit at a high-stakes royal dinner where one wrong move gets your head chopped off? That's exactly where Duke Clive finds himself, staring down the young puppet king on the throne and realizing the kid is far too young to handle this empire. Which brings us to the real mastermind pulling all the strings from behind the curtain, the cunning Queen Dowager herself, sitting there with a deadly elegant smile that screams pure trouble. Savoring a quiet glass of red wine, Clive keeps his poker face locked in, desperately trying to figure out what villainous plot is brewing behind Her Majesty's calm eyes. Clink! Gasp! Out of nowhere, the Queen Dowager drops a bomb right in front of the entire court, casually asking Clive if the rumors about him securing a fiancé are actually true. Talk about bringing zero chill to the dinner table. Clive's eyes narrow slightly as he realizes news travels faster than light in this snake pit. Seriously, does this kingdom have a royal gossip group chat or what? Playing it cool, Clive smoothly apologizes for the delayed update and announces that an official engagement party for Lady Eleanor is right around the corner. Smooth recovery, my guy. But of course, the nosy aristocrats sitting nearby immediately start whispering, wondering if the Grand Duke fell for a total nobody out of pure love at first sight. The Queen Dowager sneers with a sharp chuckle, remarking that political marriages rarely care about love, so Clive taking in a discarded girl must mean there's a juicy secret behind it. Clive internally facepalms, thanking his lucky stars he left Eleanor safe at home instead of throwing her into this wolf den, before a loud commotion cuts him off. Throwing open the banquet doors, a striking man with silver hair and glowing red eyes makes his grand entrance as the Queen Dowager warmly invites Lord Adel Vendome to join the table.
Swoosh! Flashing an impossibly charming smile, Adel greets the court, looking like he stepped straight off a high-fashion fantasy runway.
Turns out this flashy foreigner holds a terrifying reputation, rumors claiming he possesses supernatural foresight and can literally see the future. Now that's a cheat code if I've ever seen one. Rising from an immigrant to the highest position of prime minister, Adel sits right next to Clive, and you can practically feel the sub-zero tension radiating between them. Clive keeps his cool, but internally he's on high alert because unpredictable men with fake smiles are always the most dangerous enemies in these stories. Tap! Adel smoothly turns to introduce himself, praising Clive's family bloodline with a grin that feels way too staged to be genuine. He flatters Clive about his legendary father's heroic feats, acting like a total fanboy, while Clive just sits there analyzing his every movement. Taking a sip of his drink, Clive offers a brief thank you, only for an older noble across the table to chime in about how tragic it was that the hero who wiped out the vampires died so young. The noble rambles on about how pure-blooded vampires were completely erased from existence, blindly celebrating that the world is finally safe from those nocturnal monsters. Bro, if only you knew who you were sitting next to. Suddenly, the bright atmosphere shatters into pitch-black darkness as the Queen Dowager's aura turns terrifyingly cold. Shiver, in a voice that sends literal chills down everyone's spine, she asks the court what they would do if vampires were actually still lurking right among them in this very room. Dun dun dun! Time completely freezes as Clive's eyes widen in shock while the surrounding nobles look like they just saw a ghost. Talk about maximum psychological warfare! The room goes dead silent as everyone reevaluates their life choices, remembering the horrifying tales of vampire massacres from the past. The Queen Dowager lets the suffocating tension hang heavy over the lavish feast, clearly enjoying the sheer panic radiating off her guests. Honestly, check out the dramatic lighting in this shot. The artist absolutely cooked with these shadowy dark energy effects. You could hear a pin drop in the grand hall as every aristocrat holds their breath, terrified to make a single sound. Poof! Suddenly, the Queen Dowager breaks into a graceful, amused chuckle, completely shattering the dark spell. Waving her hand, she deadpans that she was just pulling their leg, teasing the high-ranking lords for being absolute cowards when it comes to bloodsuckers. Phew! The gullible noble lets out a massive sigh of relief, bursting into awkward, forced laughter to save face in front of the court. Just like that, sycophantic laughter fills the dining hall again as everyone pretends their hearts didn't just leap out of their chests. High society politics is truly exhausting. Meanwhile, Clive takes another slow sip of wine while Adel Vendome gives him a deadly side-eye glance. Yep, these two are definitely going to clash later. Fast forward back to the Clive estate. Eleanor lies alone in a massive silk-draped bed, pouting as she wonders why Clive hasn't come back after making such a big deal about sharing a room. She recalls butler William gently explaining that Clive insisted on attending the Queen's exclusive banquet entirely on his own. Sigh. Hugging the soft covers, Eleanor desperately hopes he left her behind to protect her from court drama rather than just keeping secrets. Staring up at the canopy, she feels a pang of loneliness, realizing how little she actually knows about her mysterious vampire fiancé. Drifting off into a peaceful sleep amidst white flower petals, she decides to ask Clive for official household duties as soon as he returns. Curl is ready to work. Fast forward 5 whole days later, Eleanor is practically pulling her hair out at her vanity mirror, panicking because Clive has literally ghosted her for almost a week. Turning into a stressed-out chibi, she overthinks everything, wondering if he's ghosting her because she kicked him out of the bath or because she snores too loud. Her inner monologues are comedy gold. The maid tries to reassure her that the Duke is just swamped with work, but then accidentally mutters out loud that he's a total womanizer who might be visiting another lady. Whew! Talk about zero filter. Bam! Suddenly, a sharp voice demands to know what they're whispering about, revealing Clive leaning against the doorframe with folded arms. Pouting like an offended puppy, Clive deadpans that he knocked several times before barging in, completely insulted that his bride-to-be thinks he's out cheating. Eep! Eleanor turns into a sweating chibi mess, frantically trying to play dumb while Clive glares at her with hilarious dramatic anger. Regaining his composure, Clive politely asks the head maid to clear the room so he can discuss important business with his future wife. Bowing out in a blur, the maid scampers away, leaving a nervous Eleanor wondering what serious topic he needs to bring up. Surrounded by soft sunlight, Clive opens his mouth to softly apologize for being absent for so long. Aw, look at him actually showing character growth. He slides an official document into her hands, explaining that he was busy organizing their grand engagement party and wanted her personal stamp of approval on the guest list first. Reading through the names, Eleanor thoughtfully suggests inviting her toxic stepfamily too, reasoning that snubbing them publicly would only fuel their petty revenge plots. Impressed by her mature strategy, Clive agrees and drops another surprise, announcing that they'll be making a private visit to see the Queen Dowager before the party. Eleanor nods bravely, but internally she's screaming in panic because she has 0 high-class dresses left and barely any time to hire a tailor. Seeing her intense internal panic, Clive just stares at her in dead silence with those piercing ruby eyes. Ta-da! Smirking like a true romance lead, Clive gestures toward her room and playfully tells her to go open up the walk-in closet. Oh boy, you just know that massive shopping spree he ordered arrived. Ever wonder what it's like to get surprised with a custom gift from a wealthy duke? Eleanor opens up her walk-in closet only to find an oversized wrapped gift box resting right on the shelf, and Clive is standing right behind her with a subtle smirk, encouraging her to unwrap it. Lifting the lid, Eleanor discovers a stunning, intricate dress tucked inside. Overwhelmed, she turns to Clive with wide eyes, asking if this gorgeous present is really for her, and he just smiles back like the ultimate gentleman. Holding her breath, Eleanor stammers out her thanks, but she can't help feeling hesitant as she asks if it was really okay for him to drop a small fortune on something so luxurious. Clive casually waves off her financial worries, reminding her that money is the absolute last thing he needs to stress about, and urges her to go try it on right away to see if it fits like a glove. Gazing down at the rich fabric, Eleanor self-consciously mutters to herself that someone as plain as her doesn't deserve to wear something so glamorous. Girl, please, stop doubting yourself. Swoosh! Delicate yellow flowers and elegant lace bloom across the screen as the scene transitions, building up the anticipation for her grand reveal. Cut to the drawing room. Clive sits patiently on a plush armchair, calmly reading through official documents while waiting for his future bride to finish getting dressed. Ting! The door opens, and Eleanor steps out wearing a jaw-dropping deep purple gown with delicate lace trim. Clive turns around to ask how it fits, but the second his eyes land on her, he completely freezes in total awe. Doki doki, look at Clive's face. His heart does a massive backflip and a heavy blush spreads across his cheeks. The artist absolutely nailed this jaw-dropping reaction shot. Misunderstanding his dead silence, Eleanor gets super flustered, stammering that she knew she looked weird and offering to go change back immediately. Talk about major miscommunication. Swoosh! Before she can retreat back into her room, Clive's arm moves like lightning, snatching her wrist and pulling her straight into his arms. Holding her close against his chest, Clive stares into her eyes and gently asks why she's always so timid when she looks this undeniably stunning. Gasp! Brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, Clive leans down to her neck, whispering in a low, husky voice that she looks so drop-dead gorgeous, he's struggling to suppress his urge to bite her. Eleanor blushes down to her toes, awkwardly squeaking if he's just hungry for blood and offering that he could have just asked for a drink directly. Smiling softly, Clive leans closer, admitting it's not just hunger. Her sweet scent completely drove him wild, adding that he'd love to savor her blood every single day if she'll let him. Talk about smooth vampire flirts. Eleanor internally panics over how he can utter such shameless lines with a straight face. But then a sudden thought strikes her, and she nervously asks if Clive has ever drunk blood from other people before. Clive coolly confirms that he has, sending a wave of panic through her. Eleanor stammers, asking if those people know his secret identity, only for Clive to casually reply that they can't talk because they were literally animals. Eleanor gasps in complete shock. Animals? Clive explains that animal blood tastes pretty awful compared to human blood, but vampires drink it when necessary, revealing that animal blood was actually the first blood he ever tasted as a kid. Flashback time! Clash! A young Clive is seen in a sunny garden training with wooden swords alongside two snobby young aristocrats. thud. Young Clive tumbles to the grass after taking a hit. The arrogant noble kids boast about their 3-game winning streak, trash-talking Clive for being weak despite being the hero's son. Talk about generic childhood bullies. Pouting fiercely, young Clive insists he'll grow strong like his hero father one day. But the bullies just laugh it off, demanding the rabbit Clive bet on the match before sending him off to go retrieve it. Walking over to the garden hedge, young Clive heads toward the small wooden rabbit hutch tucked away in the quiet grass. Inside, several fluffy white bunnies are resting peacefully. Clive calls out softly for his absolute favorite bunny, Eva. Scooping up the adorable white bunny into his arms, young Clive hugs her close, whispering that he'll never hand her over to those bullies and will give them another rabbit instead. Boom! Out of nowhere, a terrifying wave of dark, violent energy shatters the peaceful scene. Splat! Bright crimson blood splatters wildly across the vibrant green grass as young Clive stands in frozen horror. Sob! Crying hysterically, young Clive drops to his knees with blood dripping down his hands, cradling the lifeless body of his beloved bunny and screaming in total confusion. Dark, ominous shadows loom overhead as heavy footsteps approach the traumatized boy kneeling in the bloody garden. Clive's adoptive father, the legendary vampire hunter himself, arrives with a lantern and butler in tow, staring down at his weeping son with a grave expression. Tears streaming down his face, young Clive begs his father for help, sobbing that Eva suddenly died and he got covered in blood while trying to save her. His father looks down with a cold, heavy gaze, telling Clive to listen to every single word he is about to say very carefully. Gasp! His father bluntly states that Eva died because every single drop of blood was completely drained from her body. Young Clive trembles in horror, wondering what kind of monster could do something so sick. Pointing directly at the traumatized child, his father drops the soul-crushing truth, revealing that Clive himself was the monster who drank Eva's blood. The father solemnly explains that deep within his veins lies the dark, forbidden bloodline of a vampire. Young Clive's world completely shatters. He stammers in utter confusion, wondering how he could possibly be a blood-sucking monster when both of his parents are celebrated human heroes. Closing his eyes in profound guilt, the father lets out a heavy sigh and prepares to drop an even bigger bombshell on the poor kid. Looking down at the crying boy, the father drops the ultimate plot twist, confessing that he is not Clive's real biological father. Crack! Like glass shattering into a million pieces, the truth lands with full force as the father reveals Clive's true birth father was a pure-blooded vampire king. Talk about a brutal childhood revelation. Back to the present. Clive explains that his father tried everything to find a way to make him human before he learned the truth, but his vampire hunger awakened too early and forced his body to transform rapidly. He reveals that back then, suppressants didn't exist, so he was forced to survive by drinking animal blood, a horrifying process that filled him with deep disgust and guilt every single time. Catching himself, Clive lowers his head with a weak smile, softly apologizing to Eleanor for dragging her down with such a depressing sob story. Squeeze! Without missing a single beat, Eleanor steps forward and wraps her arms tightly around Clive, burying her face into his chest in a warm, protective embrace. Holding him close, she refuses to let go, showering him with the pure, unconditional comfort he's missed his entire life. Softly stroking his back, Eleanor whispers that everything is okay now, promising that she'll stay by his side forever while acknowledging how much pain he suffered all alone. Clive's eyes widen in absolute disbelief as a surge of overwhelming warmth fills his chest. He internally wonders what this strange, unbelievable feeling flowing through him could be. A soft spark of light flickers in his heart as he realizes this sensation feels strangely familiar, almost like a long-forgotten memory from a past life. Looking down at Eleanor, Clive opens his mouth to speak, but Eleanor suddenly gasps as a brilliant idea pops into her head, remembering a vital question she needed to ask him. Reaching into her dress, Eleanor pulls out an ancient, yellowed page from a holy scripture depicting a saintly maiden, showing him text that claims the blood of a saint combined with a holy prayer can turn a vampire back into a human. With shining, hopeful eyes, Eleanor asks Clive if there's any chance they can borrow the miraculous power of Saint Sophia to cure his condition once and for all. Clive gazes down at her with a bittersweet expression, softly breaking the painful news that Saint Sophia passed away centuries ago, meaning that faint ray of hope has long since vanished into history. Ever feel your heart suddenly skip a beat right when you realize the person you're looking at holds the secret to your entire existence? Clive's chest tightens up as he stares down at Eleanor, completely overwhelmed by a sudden, intense fluttering feeling. Dakin! Clutching his shirt right over his pounding heart, his cheeks flush bright red as the wild realization hits him. Could Eleanor's sacred ruby necklace actually be the miracle key to curing his vampire curse? I swear this guy goes from dangerous night stalker to flustered blushing maiden in 0.2 seconds. The heavy silence of the grand drawing room takes over as warm sunlight beams down through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor while Clive wrestles with the ultimate question of whether his bloodline is truly damned forever. Sweating nervously, Clive looks away and admits that even he doesn't have all the answers yet, leaving the mystery hanging heavy in the air. Eleanor instinctively reaches up to touch the glowing red ruby hanging from her neck, her wide blue eyes brimming with sheer disbelief as she asks if this simple piece of jewelry really holds the divine power of purification. Look at how the artist uses those rainbow light refractions across her purple dress. It literally screams main character magic. She recalls the long-standing rumors surrounding her family's precious heirloom, which was always said to bring endless prosperity and good fortune to the Evans house. Looking down with a heavy dose of guilt, Clive softly apologizes to her, confessing that the true secret behind the heirloom was the exact reason he asked for her hand in marriage, but he couldn't bring himself to spill the beans back then. Gasp! Seeing Eleanor's puzzled expression, Clive takes a deep breath and promises to lay out every single secret on the table so there are no more misunderstandings between them. Delicate flower petals float softly through the air as the atmosphere shifts into a deep, serious breakdown of the truth. Standing together in the magnificent sunlit hall, Clive reveals the grand reveal behind his late father's final wishes and why Eleanor was specifically chosen to be his bride above all other noble ladies. Eleanor pieced together that the late Duke must have known about the sacred ruby's purifying magic all along, but she hesitatingly points out that drinking her blood hasn't magically cured his vampirism yet. Clive agrees, but emphasizes that her blood is unlike anything on Earth. And honestly, the dynamic between these two when they actually communicate is so refreshing. Swoosh! A glowing silhouette flashes against a mystical clock background as Clive explains the incredible side effects. The moment he drinks her blood, his agonizing thirst vanishes instantly. The hunger stays away far longer, and his body feels as light as a feather. Realizing her blood really is special, Eleanor listens closely as Clive announces he needs to visit an eccentric apothecary deep in the woods to gather more blood suppressants, asking if she plans to visit Lady Melania as well. Clive gives a slight smirk, realizing the loyal butler William must have snitched on her plans beforehand. You gotta love William. The man is running the ultimate matchmaking agency behind the scenes. With shining eyes, Eleanor eagerly asks if she can tag along on the trip so she can learn all about the suppressants and understand his condition better, and Clive gently approves her request. Swirl! In an adorable chibi translation, Clive warns her with a sweat drop that Lady Melania is an extremely complicated and prickly woman, so she needs to watch her step. Chibi panels and serious manhwas never fail to hit the spot. Rustle! The scene abruptly cuts to a dark, eerie forest shrouded in pitch-black night as ominous black feathers drift slowly down through the gnarled trees. Wrapping her blue hooded cloak tightly around herself, Eleanor treads carefully through the spooky woods alongside Clive, nervously asking why on earth this apothecary lives so ridiculously far away from civilization. Clive coolly explains that Lady Melania stays hidden deep in the wilderness to avoid human eyes, revealing a grim flashback of her dark past when she was hunted down and falsely accused of witchcraft as a young girl. Flames! The horrific memory shows Melania tied to a wooden stake while an angry mob burns her alive. Clive explains that after enduring unimaginable torture, she barely escaped with her life. Man, historical villagers in these webtoons really have zero chill. Crunch! As their boots step over dead leaves, Clive clarifies that she's not an evil witch at all. She's simply a master herbalist who happens to possess the rare ability to glimpse fragments of the past and future. Stopping right in front of an ancient, ivy-covered Gothic mansion hidden under the moonlight, Clive quietly announces that they've finally reached Lady Melania's secret sanctuary. Knock, knock! Clive's white-gloved hand lifts the heavy iron door knocker, echoing a dull, heavy thud
thud into the eerie silence of the night.
Creak! The door swings open to reveal Lady Melania herself. Draped in a dark hood, her face is covered in heavy burn scars and an eye patch, grumbling that Clive certainly took his sweet time coming. Now that is an absolute badass character design.
Melania ushers them inside her cozy, antique-filled sanctuary, where warm ambient lamps illuminate clutter-covered tables, mysterious potion jars, and flying white bird mounts. Sitting down in her wooden chair, the grumpy old herbalist bluntly asks why a pampered noble lady came along, scoffing that bringing a high-class girl here won't help one bit. Clive steps right in, firmly introducing Eleanor as his fiancée, who knows every detail about his condition and deserves to understand how his suppressants are made. Melania turns her scarred neck, scoffing that she isn't the type of person who opens her doors to random strangers so easily.
Unfazed by the terrifying glare from Melania's single eye, Eleanor steps forward with pure grace, politely bowing as she introduces herself and asks for forgiveness for showing up unannounced. Talk about winning people over with pure class.
Eleanor offers to roll up her sleeves and help brew the batch, since preparing the medicine takes a ton of manual labor, leaving Melania with no choice but to smirk and accept her offer. Melania signals for both of them to follow her into the preparation room to get straight to work. Pointing to shelves overflowing with colorful crystals and apothecary jars, Melania instructs Eleanor to read the recipe list and start grinding down the specified ingredients one by one. With a heavy sigh, the old witch heads downstairs to prepare the base ingredients, telling them to call her once the initial grinding is done. Left alone in the quiet workshop, Clive and Eleanor stand side by side, surrounded by antique clocks and taxidermy birds. Seriously, why do all fantasy herbalists always have a random stuffed white owl sitting around? Eleanor scans the huge list of required ingredients in amazement, realizing how complex a single dose is, while Clive notes that it requires rare magical herbs and peculiar animal parts. The camera zooms in on the paper covered in messy cursive scribbles, classic doctor handwriting that probably requires a whole separate degree just to read. Clive gently steps up, chivalrously offering to handle all the heavy lifting and carry any heavy containers for her so she doesn't strain herself. Clack! Ignoring his worries, Eleanor climbs up a wooden stepladder, confidently insisting she can manage the top shelf just fine. Heave! Eleanor casually lugs down a massive, heavy clay jug twice the size of her torso with a proud smile, leaving Clive completely speechless down below. Never underestimate a determined manhwa heroine with hidden muscle power. Crush, crush! As Eleanor gets busy grinding herbs with a mortar and pestle, Clive carries heavy boxes in the background, asking why she bothered offering to help with such a tedious and troublesome task. Eleanor pauses her grinding, softly looking up to explain that since this medicine is meant to keep him safe, helping out is the most natural thing in the world, timidly asking if she's overstepping. She glances back nervously over her shoulder, her heart fluttering while she waits for his reaction. Clive turns around on the ladder, softly assuring her that she isn't overstepping at all. Grab. Reaching up to the high shelf, Clive spots a glass jar filled with creepy animal skulls and bones, thinking to himself that he must keep Eleanor away from this disturbing ingredient at all costs. Throb. Out of nowhere, a sharp, violent surge of pain spikes through Clive's chest. Red, energetic veins flare up violently as his body begins to reject the timing. Crash! Clive's eyes instantly ignite into a terrifying crimson glare as his hands twitch, accidentally knocking the glass jar off the shelf and shattering it into a million sharp pieces on the ground. Thud! Clive drops to his knees on the rug, clutching his head in absolute agony as suffocating black and red dark energy erupts from his body, prompting Eleanor to scream out his name in horror. Swallowed whole by wild vampiric instincts, Clive's face is cast in deep shadow as he desperately rasps out a chilling warning for her not to come a single step closer. Gasp! Eleanor freezes in absolute terror, her eyes widening as a violent shockwave of demonic blood energy blasts directly toward her. Slam! In a terrifying, jaw-dropping cliffhanger, Clive loses complete control and lunges like a feral predator, forcefully grabbing Eleanor by her collar and pinning her down while engulfed in pitch-black dark magic. Eleanor groans in pain, and now we're left screaming. Will he snap back to his senses or give in to the thirst? Imagine being pinned down by the man you love, only to realize he's completely lost to his dark vampiric instincts. Thud!
Clive grips Eleanor's neck with violent force, his crimson eyes glowing as dark, energetic lightning surges around them like a wild storm. Eleanor gasps for air as suffocating darkness settles over her vision, her voice trembling while she begs him to stop. You gotta love how manhwa artists crank up the tension. 1 minute it's sweet herb-grinding romance, and the next it's a full-on survival horror movie. Slam! Just when it seems like game over, Clive snaps back to his senses for a split second and forcefully releases Eleanor, collapsing onto the rug while shadow magic crackles through the dark room. Sitting helpless on the floor, Eleanor clutches her bruised throat, chest heaving desperately as she tries to catch her breath after nearly being drained dry by her own fiancé. Drip! A thick splash of red hits the floorboards, making Eleanor look down in utter horror, only to see blood pooling around her feet and wait, it's not even coming from her body. Clive stares at his own trembling, blood-soaked hand with wide, terrified eyes, completely horrified by the feral monster he almost became just seconds ago. Talk about a massive reality check for our brooding vampire duke. Clatter! Eleanor spots a bloody dagger lying right beside him while Clive stands motionless in despair, leaving her panicking in total confusion about how this whole situation spiraled out of control so fast. Her mind races in pure shock as the terrifying memory of his glowing fangs flashes through her head. She was literally 1 second away from becoming a vampire's midnight snack. Blood continues to drip heavily from Clive's slashed wrist onto the antique rug while he gasps for air, desperately fighting back the bloodlust that's still thrashing inside his body. Panicking at the sight of his endless bleeding, Eleanor screams out his name from the floor, completely lost on what step to take to save him without triggering another wild frenzy. Grab! Desperate to calm his ravenous hunger, Eleanor picks up the sharp dagger, ready to cut her own palm and feed him her sacred blood, until a stern voice echoes through the hall, yelling for her to stop. Creak! Lady Melania bursts into the doorway with her single eye wide in alarm, her dark cloak fluttering as she takes in the chaotic scene. Seriously, thank goodness for grumpy old herbalist showing up at the exact right second. Eleanor hysterically explains that Clive is bleeding out, but Melania takes one look at the weapon and realizes the terrifying truth. He stabbed himself with a holy blade just to keep from hurting Eleanor. Inspecting Clive's glowing wound, Melania warns Eleanor to get out immediately, bluntly revealing that if he loses control again in this weak state and bites her, his unstable demonic power will literally end her life. Swoosh! But Eleanor clenches her fists tightly against her dress, refusing to budge a single inch despite the terrifying warning hanging in the air. Looking Melania dead in the eye, Eleanor firmly declares she isn't running away, proving once again that she's got a spine of pure steel when it comes to protecting her man. You gotta respect a main character who doesn't just fold at the first sign of danger. Fast forward a bit, and we see Clive resting peacefully on a couch while Eleanor quietly sits by his side, gently tending to his bandaged body under the soft lamplight. Swish! She carefully wraps fresh white cloth around his slashed wrist, making sure every single injury is cleaned and secured with utmost tenderness. Melania steps into the quiet room carrying a cup, explaining that while vampires usually heal at lightning speed, a holy sword wound takes days to fully recover, even for a noble lord. Handing over the bitter herbal brew, Melania tells him to drink up, while Clive softly apologizes for causing so much trouble in her quiet sanctuary. Clive takes a slow sip of the steaming tea and warmly thanks her, looking like a humbled puppy after all the chaotic drama he caused earlier. Honestly, seeing this legendary vampire duke sipping tea like a disciplined kid is top-tier comedy. Watching him closely, Eleanor's mind wanders back to the terrifying moment he went berserk, realizing just how heavy and dangerous his demonic curse truly is. Noticing her intense stare, Melania bluntly asks if that was her very first time seeing a vampire's true feral urge, and Eleanor timidly confirms it. Eleanor asks if there's any suppressant that can stop the frenzy before it starts, but Melania shakes her head, confirming that no drug in existence can completely block the impulse ahead of time. Processing the witch's words, Eleanor remembers that feeding him her special blood extends the time between his frenzies, leading her to wonder if she should just let him drink her blood every single day to keep him stable. Flashback, but then she remembers how Clive fainted halfway through his last feed, making her pause as she analyzes the risks involved. She nervously blushes, questioning whether her own body could even physically endure being bitten on a daily basis without collapsing from exhaustion. Suddenly, Melania's gaze locks onto the glowing red jewel resting against Eleanor's chest. Eleanor touches the pendant, explaining it's a precious keepsake left with her at the orphanage by her birth parents. Step. A strange, serious look washes over Melania's scarred face as she asks for permission to inspect the sacred ruby closer. Glow. Reaching out her hand, Melania activates her psychometric magic, causing tiny sparks of pink and purple light to dance over the crimson gem. Flash! A sudden burst of blinding light explodes from the ruby, illuminating the entire room in a divine, ethereal glow. Check out the artist's color palette here. The light refractions across her dress are absolutely stunning. Eleanor's blue eyes widen in absolute shock as a mysterious wave of energy washes directly over her mind. Gasping softly, Eleanor touches her hair in confusion, feeling as if fragments of unknown memories just tried to leak into her brain. Melania steps back and calmly reveals that her magic allowed her to peek directly into the hidden memories locked inside the sacred necklace. Eleanor blinks in disbelief, completely stunned to learn that an inanimate piece of jewelry could actually store real, living memories from the past. Smirking mysteriously, the old witch offers to share a crucial secret as a reward for Eleanor's hard work in helping brew the medicine. Chibi transition! In an adorable chibi style, Melania cheekily asks if they've exchanged blood vows yet, explaining that when a vampire drinks blood, normal humans drop into overwhelming pleasure and completely lose their mind. Eleanor turns bright red, stuttering in total embarrassment as Melania turns to her potion cabinet, offering a permanent solution so she won't be defenseless. Clack! Pulling down a small glass vial, Melania explains that taking this special elixir before feeding Clive will allow Eleanor to maintain her full consciousness and retain her iron will against vampire mind control. She emphasizes that fresh blood speeds up Clive's recovery, so taking this medicine will eliminate her fear of losing control when she offers her neck. Talk about the ultimate buff item for our brave heroine. Grab. Melania gently hands the glowing bottle over to Eleanor, placing the destiny-changing potion right into her hands. Holding the sleek crystal vial, Eleanor gazes at it with a mix of determination and awe, knowing this little bottle could change everything between her and Clive. Russell! Later that night, under the starry sky, the black carriage arrives as Eleanor warmly thanks Lady Melania for all her incredible guidance and shelter. Creak! Clive politely opens the carriage door, stepping inside as they prepare to head back to the Duke's estate. Looking out at the herbalist, Clive sincerely thanks her for saving his life once again, looking far more composed than he did hours ago. Smirk, Melania chuckles, assuring him she'll bill him a massive sum later. But as the carriage prepares to leave, her smile fades into a dark, intense whisper about the sacred ruby. Thunder! Clive pauses in surprise, asking if she unlocked the gem's hidden memories, and Melania grimly confirms it, adding that there are terrible secrets Eleanor should never find out. With a heavy heart, Melania drops a massive bombshell, revealing her vision suggests Eleanor's biological mother was brutally murdered. Clive's eyes widen in absolute horror. Flashback. A chilling memory shows a blood-soaked nursery where a helpless baby cries inside a crib while a sinister man laughs maniacally in the background. Man, historical webtoon backstories are always so unhinged. Grabbing the carriage window, Clive desperately demands to know who committed the heinous crime, but Melania solemnly shakes her head, leaving us with a spine-chilling mystery to unravel next time. Just when you thought the drama was settling down, the old witch drops a terrifying bomb, revealing that the sinister man who murdered Eleanor's mother put a dark curse on the child before vanishing into the shadows. Clive's crimson eyes widen in utter shock as he questions what kind of curse could be hanging over his fiancée's head, feeling the mystery deepen under the moonlight. Inside the quiet carriage, Clive sits in deep, restless thought, warning himself that while everything seems calm right now, catastrophic danger could strike at any second. Talk about an eerie calm before the storm. Russell! Breaking the tense silence, Eleanor gently turns to check on him, asking in a soft voice if his self-inflicted holy wound is still tormenting his body. Clive softens his gaze, admitting the pain has faded thanks to her tender nursing, but immediately apologizes for losing control earlier and breaching their contractual terms. Eleanor's heart drops at his cold wording, completely stunned to hear him frame that terrifying life-or-death moment as a simple violation of a business deal.
Clive reminds her of their original agreement, a safe and comfortable life in exchange for a pretend marriage, making Eleanor realize she was so desperate to save his life earlier that she completely forgot this was supposed to be a fake relationship.
Trying to make up for scaring her, Clive earnestly offers to grant her any wish or gift she desires, promising that even if it's hard to get, he'll do whatever it takes to obtain it for her. Looking out the window into the misty night, Eleanor quietly ponders what she truly wants from the man who holds her heart. Softly turning back to him under the dim carriage lights, she musters up all her courage to ask for a single, life-changing favor. Thud! The carriage rocks along the bumpy night road as the heavy silence between them builds up unbearable tension. Eleanor stares into his crimson eyes with unwavering determination, ready to sacrifice everything to keep him safe from his own feral instincts. Clive tilts his head, wondering what grand request his brave little fiancé could possibly have up her sleeve. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor prepares to drop her secret proposal, knowing there's no turning back once the words leave her lips. Gasp! In a bold, unbelievable move, Eleanor asks Clive to drink her sacred blood every single day. Man, talk about a proposal that would leave any vampire completely speechless. Swoosh! Ethereal blue flowers bloom around the frame, perfectly capturing the tender yet intense romantic atmosphere building inside the quiet carriage. Clive's jaw literally drops in utter bewilderment as he stammers out why in the world she would suddenly ask for something so wild and reckless out of nowhere. Eleanor calmly explains her logic. Regularly feeding on her blood keeps his bloodlust in check and heals his body, so taking it daily is the ultimate way to stop the sudden frenzies before they start. Clive immediately shuts it down with deep concern, warning her that her frail human body could never endure being drained on a daily basis. Honestly, you gotta love how the brooding vampire duke is more worried about her health than she is. Stares into her eyes, reminding her of the overwhelming physical toll and mind-numbing sensation that occurs whenever a vampire feeds on a human. Eleanor blushes furiously, stuttering in total embarrassment before pulling out the glowing potion bottle from Melania to prove she won't faint or lose her mind. Giving him a reassuring smile, Eleanor promises her body will be fine, prompting Clive to sigh and reveal that if she's truly serious, he has one grave favor to ask of her in return. Gasp! Eleanor tilts her head in confusion, her heart skipping a beat as she asks what kind of favor the gloomy duke could possibly want from her. Clatter! The carriage wheels clatter against the gravel road as Clive's voice drops to a chilling, serious whisper about his ultimate fear. Shine! Pulling out a sleek, ornate dagger, Clive holds out the holy weapon with steady, resolute hands right in front of her. Eleanor pales in absolute horror, her eyes widening as the terrifying reality of his words starts to sink in. Looking at her with heartbreaking sincerity, Clive admits that if he ever completely loses his sanity and turns into a feral monster, he never wants to hurt her or anyone else. Flash! In a dramatic split panel, Eleanor tremblingly asks if he's actually asking her to end his life, and Clive coldly confirms it without a single second of hesitation. Tears. Clutching the cold steel in her lap, Eleanor cries out that she could never kill the man she loves, but Clive gently insists that putting down a vampire would make her a hero, not a sinner. He even adds that upon his death, the entire Evans family estate would legally belong to her, making Eleanor snap that his massive fortune isn't the issue at all. Chains. Surrounded by shadowy dark chains, Clive softly reminds her that he entered this contract specifically so he could die with his human dignity intact, leaving Eleanor feeling like a heavy blade just pierced her own soul. Staring down at the sharp dagger resting in her lap, Eleanor clutches her chest in deep emotional agony, realizing how tragically bound they both are to this contract. Clive tells her to keep the blade regardless, leaving the ultimate choice in her hands, while Eleanor quietly agrees with a somber nod. Sunshine! The mood brightens up dramatically as we cut to a lush, sunlit garden where a brown-haired noblewoman stands waiting before a blonde young man named Lord Jules trots over. Flashy and full of arrogance, Jules flashes a sly smile and apologizes for being late, boasting about how he dropped all his important work just to rush to her side. Seriously, look at this guy's smug face. He has classic secondary villain written all over him. Flinch! But as Jules reaches out to greet her warmly, Angela violently marching past him with a heavy scowl, Angela bluntly declares that she isn't in the mood for his romantic nonsense today. Smirk! Jules tries to play it off smoothly, claiming Eleanor must just be green with envy over their relationship, only for Angela to scoff and drop the news that Eleanor is marrying Duke Evans.
Shock. Jules' expression completely freezes as his smug confidence shatters into a million tiny pieces.
Angela looks at him with pure disdain, warning him that an official invitation to Eleanor's grand engagement party will be hitting his mailbox real soon. Great. Veins practically pop on Angela's forehead as she fumes in jealousy, unable to digest that her quiet, helpless sister is about to become a high-ranking duchess. A dramatic flashback image of Eleanor wearing her glowing ruby pendant flashes across Jules' mind, leaving him completely paralyzed with disbelief. Jules stammers in total denial, unable to accept that the sweet girl he dumped could move on so fast. His brain completely short-circuits as he tries to convince himself that Eleanor was so deeply in love with him that she couldn't possibly fall for another man already. Talk about delusional ex-fiancé syndrome. Dark bubble. Angela leans in closer, whispering sinister lies about what Eleanor supposedly said about him behind closed doors. Angela blatantly fabricates a story, claiming Eleanor bragged about how glad she was to escape a useless man like Lord Jules, making her look like a heartless snob. Jules shouts out in absolute outrage, passionately defending Eleanor and insisting his former fiancé would never say such cruel things. Drama. Looking down at him with a green, manipulative gaze, Angela warns Jules that her sister is far more terrifying and conniving than he could ever imagine. She sneers, pointing out that no normal girl would willingly marry a terrifying monster unless she was driven by pure, vengeful ambition. Dun dun dun! Jules gasps in horror as Angela reveals the ultimate secret, that Duke Evans is actually a bloodthirsty vampire, leaving us on a massive cliffhanger as the drama explodes. Talk about total denial! Lord Jules nervously laughs off the terrifying truth, trying to convince himself that calling someone the Vampire Duke is just a dramatic nickname and not a literal diagnosis. Scream! Angela goes full theatrical, shouting at the top of her lungs that she heard it with her own ears. She claims the Duke literally drinks human blood and that she's been living in absolute terror. Squeezing out fake crocodile tears, Angela buries her face in her hands, whining about how cruel Jules is for not believing her delicate, traumatized self. Honestly, someone give this girl an Oscar for Best Dramatic Performance. Hook, line, and sinker. Seeing her weep, Jules' brain completely short-circuits as he vows to stand by her side and shield her from the big bad monster. Sob! As Angela keeps up the pathetic sobbing routine, Jules melts into a puddle of guilt and softly apologizes for ever doubting her. Taking her by the shoulders, Jules gives her his word that he believes every single thing she says, urging her to wipe those tears away. Gasp! Angela clings to him like a helpless kitten, and suddenly, Jules' eyes sharpen as he announces he has a brilliant plan brewing in that foolish head of his. Planning. Zooming out over the lush palace gardens, Jules casually plots high treason, explaining that if they expose the Duke's bloody secret at the engagement party, the kingdom will have no choice but to sentence him to death. Shock! Angela gasps in sheer disbelief, wide-eyed as she questions how two regular nobles are supposed to trap a centuries-old apex predator without getting eaten alive. Smirk. Jules gets that classic overconfident villain grin, assuring her they just need to set a clever trap to force the monster to reveal his true, feral form in front of everyone. Patting her hands gently, Jules repeats his promise to keep her safe, blissfully unaware that he's walking straight into a meat grinder. Dark aura. Swallowed by shadowy darkness, Jules dramatically clenches his fist, telling Angela to leave every single detail of this deadly operation to him. Man, the audacity of this guy is truly off the charts. Palace scene. Cut to the grand kingdom of Dietrich. Inside a massive sunlit throne room, an elegant silver-haired queen sits atop her golden throne as Clive and Eleanor make their official entry. Stepping onto the plush red carpet, Duke Clive offers a formal greeting, introducing his stunning fiancée Eleanor to Her Majesty. Bow! Eleanor drops into a picture-perfect royal curtsy, her regal purple dress sweeping the floor as she gracefully introduces herself to the ruler of the realm.
Looking down from her high throne, Her Majesty's sharp eyes scan Eleanor, noting that she's heard plenty of juicy rumors about the Topaz family's eldest daughter. Eleanor calmly sets the record straight, explaining she's officially severed ties with the Topaz house, prompting the queen to tilt her head, questioning why she left home before the wedding even happened. Smirk, with a subtle, dangerous smile, Her Majesty directly asks if Eleanor was unceremoniously kicked out of her own home like trash. Eleanor stands frozen under the intense glare of the royal court, calculating her next move carefully. Thoughts. Internal panic mode activated. Eleanor realizes that if she badmouths her adoptive family or lies to cover it up, Her Majesty will immediately brand her as untrustworthy. Clenching her hands, Eleanor's golden eyes flame with intense determination as she prepares to spin the narrative like an absolute boss. Bold declaration. Standing tall, Eleanor boldly announces that her departure was driven entirely by her fierce desire for personal independence. Her Majesty raises a silver eyebrow, clearly intrigued by such an unconventional answer from a noble lady. Eleanor smoothly explains that turning 25 it was high time she flew the coop, and relying on her family's wealth any longer felt deeply uncomfortable. She gently reminds the court that she was originally an orphan with no noble lineage, so staying under their wing forever felt wrong. Glow! Bathed in warm sunlight, Eleanor asserts that her gratitude to the Topaz family is genuine, proving her heart is completely free of bitter resentment. Smile! Impressed by her grace and humility, Her Majesty smiles warmly, admitting the House of Topaz made a colossal mistake by letting go of a gem like her. Step! Rising gracefully from her throne, the Queen declares that Eleanor is both clever and humble, a true rarity in high society. Approaching the blonde beauty, the Queen softly notes that even without flashy jewelry or heavy adornments, Eleanor's beauty naturally shines through. Touch! In a shockingly intimate move, Her Majesty gently reaches out and lifts Eleanor's chin, staring deeply into her eyes while calling her vibrant and gorgeous. Flirt! Leaning in super close with a teasing whisper, the Queen purrs that she could just eat Eleanor right up. Whoa, someone hold Clive back before he loses his mind. Stepping back with a satisfied chuckle, Her Majesty graciously offers them the finest guest suite in the palace to rest up. Clive offers a respectful bow of gratitude, accepting the monarch's lavish hospitality. Swish! Her Majesty turns on her heel, her royal cape trailing behind her as she exits the grand reception hall. Whew! As soon as the Queen leaves, Eleanor lowers her head and lets out a massive sigh of relief after surviving that verbal interrogation. Walking down the sunlit golden corridor of the palace, Eleanor nervously checks in with Clive, asking if her conduct was acceptable to the royal family. Clive glances at her with rare softness, assuring her that her performance was absolute perfection and noting how rare it is for the cold queen to show such favoritism. Eleanor gazes off thoughtfully, realizing that being different and staying true to herself can actually be a massive strength in this cutthroat world. Clive looks over in curiosity, prompting Eleanor to confess that her adoptive family always belittled her unique golden looks, calling her appearance unpleasant and alien. Soft gazes. As they stroll side by side, Clive softly interjects, whispering that he personally finds every single thing that makes her different to be utterly endearing. Blush! A massive pink explosion of romance hits the screen as Eleanor blushes furiously, her heart doing backflips in her chest at the gloomy Duke's sudden, smooth flirtation. Notice! Suddenly, a loud voice shatters the romantic atmosphere, calling out Eleanor's name from down the grand hallway. Sparkle! Standing at the end of the hall is a dashing, brown-haired young man in a sleek green Royal Guard uniform, glowing like a shonen protagonist as he asks if she remembers him. Flashback! A bright memory panel flashes across the screen, showing the young guard back when he was just a little orphan boy. Reunion! Eleanor's eyes widen in shock as she recognizes him as Luca, her long-lost childhood friend from her orphanage days. Luca dashes over with an enormous smile, overjoyed to reunite after all these years, while Clive looms in the background like a dark cloud, wondering who this random guy is. Turning to her childhood buddy, Eleanor proudly introduces the brooding, dark-haired man beside her as her official fiancé, Duke Clive Evans. Eleanor teases Luca about how the little crybaby from the orphanage somehow grew up to become a brave royal guard, making Luca laugh sheepishly in embarrassment.
Jealousy. Oh boy, look at Clive's face. A terrifying dark aura of possessive jealousy erupts around the vampire duke as he glares daggers at the handsome guard chatting up his fiancée. Interrupt. Incapable of watching them smile at each other for another second, Clive abruptly steps between them, coldly claiming they have urgent plans to attend to immediately. Talk about a jealous boyfriend moment. Clive leans in close to Eleanor, dropping a heavy reminder that she used to beg for his presence every single day. Eleanor stands flustered and speechless, her cheeks flushing bright pink under his sudden overwhelming proximity. Interrupting the tension, Luca steps in with a polite smile, apologizing to Eleanor that duty calls and he has to take his leave for now. Flashing a warm, gentle smile, Luca promises to write her a letter soon, leaving Eleanor with a soft promise that she'll be waiting. Watching them walk away together down the sunlit corridor, Luca stands alone in silence as the mood shifts dramatically. Drama! A shadowy glint flashes in Luca's eye as he watches Duke Clive take off with Eleanor. Seriously, is every handsome guard in these stories hiding a secret dark side? Back in her grand guest suite, Eleanor pulls out a mysterious potion bottle gifted by Lady Malea, holding it up like her ultimate survival secret weapon. Pour. With a steady hand, she pours the magical sedative into a goblet, convincing herself this liquid courage will keep her completely calm when the bloodthirsty Duke comes for a bite. She takes a quick sip, but suddenly freezes mid-gulp when a deep, brooding voice echoes from across the room. Spin around! Eleanor whirls around in panic, hiding the glass behind her back like a guilty kid caught stealing cookies. Duke Clive leans against the doorway dressed in a loose white robe, eyeing her up and down with intense red eyes that could melt steel. Chibi mode. Swooping in with total deadpan snark, Clive bluntly asks if she seriously expects him to feast on her blood while she's still wearing that giant formal ball gown. Talk about a mood killer. Red-faced and panicked, Eleanor stammers out that she'll change right away and scuttles off to the dressing room, while Clive lets out a smug little chuckle. Standing alone in the dimly lit bedroom, Clive glares down at the mysterious goblet sitting on the nightstand. Waiting, taking a seat on the edge of the massive royal bed, the brooding vampire Duke quietly waits for his lovely fiancée to return. Swish! Moments later, Eleanor steps back into the room wearing a sleek, light nightgown, taking a deep breath to prepare herself for what's to come. Shock! Eleanor's eyes fly wide open in absolute horror as she stares at the table. The spiked glass is completely bone dry. Trembling, she tentatively asks Clive if he drank the liquid, and without missing a beat, the Duke casually admits he chugged the entire thing. Internal panic mode activated. Eleanor freaks out internally, wondering what crazy side effects this potion will trigger on a high-tier vampire, frantically asking him if he feels weird. Boom! Before she can even finish her sentence, Clive pins her down onto the bed with shocking speed. Jealousy overload. Hovering right above her, Clive's eyes burn with possessive rage as he demands to know if she has a thing for childhood guards, admitting he despises seeing her look at other men like that. Eleanor tries to stammer out an explanation, but Clive leans in closer, his dark aura completely wrapping around the room like a romantic trap. He lets out a heavy, hot breath right against her skin, man. The tension in this panel is so thick you could slice it with a sword. Rustle. Shrugging off his robe, Clive discards the fabric onto the floor, letting his red eyes lock onto her with pure, unadulterated desire. Shirtless and swoon-worthy, the Duke whispers a half-hearted apology, declaring that he has absolutely zero intention of holding back tonight. Glow! Feast your eyes on those top-tier manhwa abs, folks. Looks like the artist pulled out all the budget for this dramatic reveal. Squeeze! Clive tightly intertwines his fingers with hers, locking their hands together as Eleanor gasps in surprise. Frantically raising her voice, Eleanor tries to warn him that the water he drank was laced with a powerful sleeping draft. Smooch! Clive instantly shuts her up with a passionate, breathtaking kiss that completely blows her mind into oblivion. Pulling back just an inch, he stares deeply into her golden eyes, reminding her in a husky voice that she is destined to be his wife. He leans down and nuzzles her neck, whispering that her sweet, unguarded nature around other men drives him absolutely insane. Blushing furiously, Eleanor softly questions if he's actually going to bite her neck and drink her blood like he promised. Clive groans softly, warning her not to tease him like that when she knows blood drinking makes her extra sensitive. Eleanor's mind races as she tries to calculate her next move under his overwhelming romantic assault. Clenching his jaw, Clive whispers in frustration, asking why she has such a powerful, inescapable hold over his heart. Angst! A shadow of deep melancholy crosses his face as he bitterly laments that a monster like him has no right to love anyone.
Thud. Suddenly, the Duke's body goes completely limp, collapsing straight onto Eleanor's chest.
He slumps heavily over her, his breathing slowing down into a peaceful, deep slumber as the room falls dead silent. Phew! Eleanor lets out a massive sigh of relief, realizing Lady Malaya's knockout potion finally kicked in right before things got rated R. Gazing down at his resting face, she soft smiles, thinking to herself how surprisingly innocent and harmless the terrifying vampire Duke looks when he's fast asleep. Gently, carefully sliding out from under him, Eleanor gently tucks him into the grand bed, taking extra care not to wake the sleeping beauty. Gasp! Suddenly, Clive's arms shoot out in his sleep, pulling her down into a tight hug and pressing a gentle subconscious kiss to her forehead while whimpering her name. Eleanor's heart jumps into her throat at his sudden, sleepy affection, her face burning up all over again. Nestling beside him under the warm covers, Eleanor looks at his serene face with newfound warmth and affection. Soft moment. She softly whispers into the quiet night, promising her sleepy Duke that she isn't going anywhere. Morning! Morning light streams through the stained glass windows as Clive slowly flutters his eyes open, groaning at the blinding sunshine. Sitting up, the Duke blinks in total confusion, noticing how strangely light and refreshed his entire body feels after a full night's sleep. Noticing Eleanor sitting nearby, Clive calls out a soft good morning, while Eleanor nervously stammers an apology for passing out on the bed. Flashing a rare, gentle expression, Clive admits that sleeping right next to her gave him the best, most rejuvenating rest of his life. Cliffhanger! Eleanor stares at him in utter disbelief, realizing the divine ruby around her neck must have healed his vampiric exhaustion, and worse, he has zero memory of his wild, jealous confession from last night. Talk about an epic plot twist. Imagine waking up next to a brooding vampire Duke who completely forgot he poured his heart out to you last night. Clive blinks in total confusion, rubbing his head and asking if anything weird actually happened yesterday while Eleanor just stares at him in disbelief. Eleanor puffs her cheeks out with a massive pout, looking like a disappointed cat. Clive notices her bad mood instantly, asking why she's so annoyed, but she just huffs and walks off, claiming she's totally fine. Clive quickly scrambles after her, apologizing for passing out first and swearing he has zero memory of last night's dramatic confession. Talk about a total memory wipe right when things were getting good. With a sudden flick of his wrist, Clive catches her arm and pulls her back, his fiery red eyes locking onto her as he demands to know what on earth he did yesterday. As the mood drops to sub-zero, Clive's eyes narrow onto the dark mark on her skin, coldly asking her who dared to put a mark on his fiancé. Eleanor's face turns beet red as she immediately covers her neck, huffing that his obsessive jealousy is none of his business. But Clive steps in even closer, warning her that everything about her is his business. Meanwhile, in a shadowy palace, a sinister silver-haired vampire king named Adel sips red wine on his throne, mockingly calling Eleanor a weak, powerless little girl that Clive is foolishly obsessing over. Adel's eyes glow with malicious intent as he chuckles that stealing someone else's precious trophy is his absolute favorite hobby, ordering Luca, who's kneeling right before him, to prepare for their next move. Honestly, look at this guy sitting on his throne like a classic final boss. Adel scoffs at the idea of Clive being in love, convinced that targeting Eleanor will be the ultimate way to crush his rival. Adele flashes a terrifying glare, asking Luca if he agrees that she's worth snatching away, and Luca bows his head without hesitation. Talk about a treacherous childhood friend. Cut to the main event! The grand banquet hall is overflowing with sparkling chandeliers, high society aristocrats, and clinking wine glasses as the social season kicks into high gear. A group of fancy noblewomen swarm Eleanor, showering her with fake smiles and sweet congratulations on her sudden engagement to the terrifying vampire Duke. Eleanor scans the crowded hall nervously, keeping an eye out for her abusive adoptive family, the Topaz family, who hasn't shown up yet. A dark memory flashes across her mind of her cruel adoptive parents belittling her, making her sigh deeply in hopes that they won't make a scene in front of everyone tonight. Suddenly, Eleanor's eyes widen in surprise as a tall, imposing figure cuts right through the sea of nobles. Clive strides into the ballroom looking like $1,000,000 in a sleek ice blue suit, turning heads left and right. Man, the artist really put overtime into his character design today. His piercing crimson eyes lock directly onto Eleanor from across the room, instantly shutting down all the background noise around them. Striding right up to her, Clive softly asks if she's holding up okay, knowing how much she hates being surrounded by fake aristocrats. Eleanor tries to play it cool with a polite smile, but Clive sees right through her front, leaning down to ask what's really bugging her. She takes a quiet breath and admits that all these bright lights and judgy looks are making her super nervous. Without missing a beat, Clive gently takes her hand and draws her in close, cutting through her anxiety in an instant. Rose petals in glowing light erupt around them as Clive wraps his arm around her waist, prompting the surrounding crowd to gasp in awe at how stunning they look together. Eleanor whispers flusteredly that literally everyone is staring at them, but Clive just smirks arrogantly, declaring that they deserve to steal the entire spotlight tonight. She blushes furiously, muttering under her breath that she's never been a fan of being the center of attention. Clive chuckles softly, whispering right into her ear that drawing eyes is just the curse of being drop-dead gorgeous, and tonight she looks prettier than anyone else in the room. Eleanor's heart skips a beat as she gazes back into his deep red eyes, totally spellbound by a sudden charm offensive. But just when things get ultra-romantic, Clive ruins the vibe with a classic smug remark, teasing that even though she's a few levels below him in status, she still cleans up nice. Eleanor turns her back with an angry while Chibi Clive instantly panics, waving his hands around, trying to explain that he was just joking around. Letting out a soft giggle, Eleanor smiles warmly, telling him not to get so worked up over a little teasing. Clive blinks in defeat, dizzy from her sudden counterattack and realizing she's becoming quite the clever match for him. She gives him a playful look, admitting that since he's always teasing her, she just wanted to turn the tables on him for once. Standing together in the crowded hall, Eleanor leans gently into his chest, thinking to herself how surprisingly safe and comfortable she feels around this gloomy duke. Surrounded by glowing purple blooms, her face softens into a radiant smile. Honestly, their dynamic shifting from cold contract to genuine trust is peak romance trope execution. The sweet moment is broken when Clive glances over his shoulder, remembering he still has formal greetings to finish with the high nobility. Clive turns back to her, offering to stay, but Eleanor reassures him that she can hang out on her own for a bit. Clenching his jaw, Clive drops a heavy warning, telling her to come straight to him if anyone from that trashy Topaz family tries to mess with her. Eleanor holds her ground, insisting she can handle her own problems without him constantly playing knight in shining armor, but Clive isn't having it. Looking deep into her eyes, Clive firmly reminds her that their engagement contract guarantees his protection, so she needs to start leaning on him a little more. Eleanor's cheeks flush pink at his intense protectiveness, softly nodding as she accepts his promise. With a final wave, Clive walks away into the crowd, leaving Eleanor standing alone with her racing thoughts. A sudden wave of sadness washes over her as she tells herself that his kindness is purely business because of their engagement deal. Talk about miscommunication angst. Deciding to distract herself, Eleanor steps toward the refreshment table to grab a cold drink and clear her head. Suddenly, a slimy, familiar voice calls out her name, catching her completely off guard. Eleanor turns around in shock to find Jules, her arrogant ex-fiancé, with a hideous yellow bow, grinning smugly as he pretends to congratulate her. Her stomach drops as she stammers out a cold thank you, totally stunned by his audacity to show his face around her. Jules struts up to her with maximum condescension, reminding her how he always promised he'd find someone better and get married before her. Spouting total nonsense, Jules sneers that the Duke only wants her for her face, warning her that pretty flowers fade fast and Clive will toss her aside for someone else soon. Eleanor lets out an exhausted sigh, calling him out directly for making such fake passive-aggressive congratulations. Jules puts on a pathetic, smug display, claiming it's ridiculous for her to think he's just trying to get her attention back. Eleanor facepalms in pure disgust, shutting him down completely by declaring she has zero interest in him. Jules's smug face instantly crumples in humiliation, clenching his fist in total rage as his fragile ego shatters into a million pieces. Just when you think a trashy ex couldn't get any worse, Jules corners Eleanor at the party with the most absurd smirk, asking if her engagement fell through because of him. Eleanor looks at him in utter disgust, wondering how someone can be this delusional. Dark vibes. Jules leans in with a toxic grin, spouting utter nonsense about how her reputation is ruined because he spent time with him in the past. Seriously, look at this guy's smug face. He really thinks he's some kind of mastermind, radiating pure villain energy while trying to make her feel powerless. He pushes even further, mockingly questioning if the Duke knows about her past. Eleanor's eyes widen in shock, internally reminding herself that her marriage is just a contract anyway. So why does her heart hurt so much? Clenching her fists, Eleanor worries about Clive finding out, while Jules puts on a fake, creepy act of promising he'll be the one to comfort her when things fall apart. He reaches out towards her waist with total disregard for her boundaries, claiming that even if he can't marry her, he still wants her. Flashback shock! A horrific memory flashes in her mind of Jules trying to force her into becoming his hidden mistress? Talk about the absolute peak of trashy male lead behavior. Slap! The sudden tension shatters the quiet night air as Eleanor's survival instincts kick in. Crash! Refusing to be victimized, Eleanor violently slaps his hand away, sending a hidden razor blade clattering to the floor. Tears welling in her eyes, Eleanor shouts that she never wants to speak to him again, spinning around to run down the Grand Palace hallway as Jules stands there stunned. Footsteps. She bursts out into the quiet palace gardens, the soothing splash of the illuminated fountain doing nothing to calm her racing heart. Gasping for air, Eleanor clutches her chest in pure disgust, trying to wipe the traumatic memories from her mind until a sudden sharp sting makes her wince. Looking down at her palm, her eyes widen in shock as red blood drips onto her dress. She didn't even realize she sliced her hand during that struggle. Heavy steps. Jules comes barreling into the garden like some relentless hound, yelling that running away is pointless and threatening to destroy her reputation with the Duke. Eleanor bolts through the glowing rose arbors, begging him to stop following her, but Jules refuses to give up the chase. Man, this guy really doesn't know when to take a hint. Snap! Just as Eleanor thinks she's cornered, a sudden hand reaches out from the shadows and grabs Jules' wrist in a vice grip. Entrance! Out of nowhere, Duke Adel, the silver-haired vampire king, appears like an ethereal phantom, holding Jules back with frightening ease. Jules freezes mid-stride, his face instantly turning pale as he realizes he just got caught red-handed by the Duke of Vendôme. Ignoring Jules completely, Adele glances toward Eleanor with a smooth, hypnotic calm, softly asking if she's holding up okay. Jules grits his teeth, trying to save face by barking that this is private business and telling the Duke to stay out of it. Adel's crimson eyes gleam with dangerous amusement, letting out a subtle smirk that tells you he's about to play some high-stakes psychological games. With ultimate sass, Adele points out that this garden is famous for secret rendezvous, warning Jules that harassing a high-society lady in public is going to look real bad for his family's reputation. Thoroughly humiliated, Jules backs off with a furious glare, dropping one last pathetic threat that her future status rests in his hands before storming off. As Jules finally disappears, Eleanor clutches her chest with a deep sigh of relief, though the lingering shock leaves her trembling. Chatter! Cut back inside to the sparkling ballroom, where aristocrats are laughing and clinking wine glasses in total ignorance of the drama outside. Standing near the wine fountain, Clive swirls his glass thoughtfully, feeling an uneasy knot in his stomach despite Eleanor telling him she was fine on her own. A pompous nobleman approaches him trying to pitch a mining investment, but Clive isn't paying attention to a single word. Suddenly, Clive's eyes snap open as a sweet, distinct scent cuts right through the heavy perfume in the room. Vampire's senses engaged, his red eyes glow with lethal intensity as he instantly recognizes the unique, intoxicating scent of Eleanor's blood. Meanwhile, in the quiet corridor, Adele walks beside Eleanor, noticing how ghostly pale she looks and offering to fetch her a drink to recover. Eleanor politely steps back, pleading with him to return to the banquet hall so they don't start any scandalous rumors among the nobility. Adel just chuckles smoothly, reassuring her that this secluded wing is completely empty and offering to guide her somewhere safe to rest. Eleanor's mind races with anxiety. She can't blatantly disrespect a high duke, but her trusty guard Luca is nowhere in sight. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Touch. Adel gently reaches out and takes her hand, his eyes narrowing as he notices the crimson wound that refuses to stop bleeding. Creepy vibes! Muttering under his breath, Adel hypnotically whispers how remarkably beautiful her blood smells, sending a shiver of terror straight down Eleanor's spine. Swoosh! Just as the atmosphere turns dangerously sinister, heavy footsteps echo through the hall as Clive comes storming down the corridor. Adele turns around with a playful, arrogant smirk, casually addressing Duke Evans as if he didn't just get caught acting like a total creep. Clive stops in his tracks, letting out an icy, frustrated sigh that could freeze the entire palace floor solid. His intense crimson gaze drops immediately to Eleanor's hand, watching the red drops fall to the marble ground. Without hesitation, Clive steps right between them, pulling Eleanor firmly into a space while she flusteredly explains that Vendôme was just helping her. Wrapping a fiercely protective arm around her waist, Clive gives Adel a death glare, coldly thanking him for the help and declaring that he'll handle his fiancée now. Adel's eyes narrow with amusement, calmly taking a step back as he absorbs the intense hostility radiating off his rival. Bowing with fake politeness, Adele apologizes for overstepping his bounds and bids Lady Eleanor a smooth farewell before slipping away. Watching them walk off down the hall, Adel's smirk fades into a chilling expression as he realizes Eleanor is Clive's ultimate weakness. Honestly, this silver-haired king is the definition of a plotting mastermind. You can practically see the evil gears turning in his head. Dark thoughts. A sinister aura swirls around Adel as he thinks to himself how satisfying it will be to snatch Eleanor away just to see the broken look on Clive's face. Soft moment. Away from the party chaos, Clive kneels gently in front of Eleanor, dabbing a soft cotton swab over her cut with absolute delicacy. Eleanor gazes down at him nervously, asking if the sight of her blood is triggering his vampire instincts, but Clive softly reassures her that he took a suppression medicine earlier. Leaning in close with genuine concern in his eyes, Clive drops his guard completely and asks her to tell him what really happened back there. Looking down with flustered, embarrassed eyes, Eleanor softly admits that Jules cornered her and made her panic, setting the stage for a major reckoning once Clive gets his hands on that trashy ex. Ever wonder what happens when a scary vampire duke realizes someone put a scratch on his lady? Clive's crimson eyes flash with lethal anger as he directly asks Eleanor if that trashy ex-fiancé Jules was the piece of garbage who dared to hurt her. Eleanor softly admits that she got cut while shoving Jules away, and the moment those words leave her mouth, the mood drops below zero. A dark, terrifying aura begins to swirl around Clive as his self-control barely hangs on by a thread. Flashback of trash! A hideous memory of Jules pops up, smirking like a delusional maniac, while threatening that if he opens his mouth, the Duke will dump her in a heartbeat. Honestly, the level of audacity this guy has is wild. He really thinks he's the main character when he's barely NPC tier. Apology time. Guilt fills Eleanor's eyes as she apologizes for not calling him immediately, explaining that she thought she could handle the situation on her own. But Clive isn't angry at her at all. He's quietly seething at his own powerlessness. Shaking his head, Clive lowers his gaze and whispers a genuine apology, reassuring Eleanor that she did absolutely nothing wrong. He admits he's only furious at himself for failing to protect her when she needed him most. Kneeling before her like a devoted knight, Clive's voice cracks with raw guilt as he confesses that he should have been the very first person to rush to her side, way before Duke Vendôme ever showed up. Heartstrings pulled! Looking up at her with pure tenderness, Clive reminds her how he promised she could rely on him, yet failed when it counted. Look at that gorgeous art panel. The emotional depth and soft lighting here is seriously breathtaking. Soft whispers. The atmosphere turns incredibly gentle as Clive tenderly murmurs how much pain she must have been in, cradling her wounded hand like it's made of fragile glass. Gentle touch? He wraps his larger hand around her neatly bandaged palm with absolute reverence, making sure not to apply even a fraction of pressure to her injury. Sitting in that grand chair, Eleanor stares down at this powerful vampire lord kneeling at her feet, repeating his heartfelt apology over and over as if he committed a cardinal sin. Flustered Duke! Eleanor's mind reels because she's never seen Clive look this vulnerable or open before. Feeling her intense gaze, Clive turns his face away slightly, shyly asking her not to stare at him so much. Can we talk about how adorable a flustered cold Duke is? Thump, thump. Eleanor's heart starts pounding wildly against her chest as a sudden wave of emotion overwhelms her. She starts asking herself why she suddenly feels this overwhelming urge to wrap her arms around him and hold him tight. Looking at his collarbone and chest so close to her, her thoughts race out of control as she wonders why every instinct in her body is screaming to pull him even closer.
Her eyes widen in realization. All her emotional walls and logical arguments about this being just a business contract are completely crumbling to dust right before her eyes.
Bold move. Reaching out her hand, Eleanor softly places her palm against Clive's cheek, catching him completely off guard as he gasps out her name in surprise. Absolute cinema! Without hesitating for another second, Eleanor leans in and plants a passionate, romantic kiss straight on Clive's lips among a sea of glowing white roses. Talk about a legendary cliffhanger to end the chapter.